Oh, this is great. My favorite people are all here, and there's a few more hopefully joining through the course of what I think is going to be, 2 hours. We'll see how long we go. A lot of people dropping in, dropping out, but we have some of the main bastards here already.
I like it.
So, guys, this has been an extremely traumatic and traumatizing week, and one of the reasons I wanted to set this up is not just to kind of help people deal with the despair, although this is a big part of it. And there seems to be a lot of people who are confused, a lot of people who are lost, and actually, Ukrainians I spoke to, displaced Ukrainians. This does feel like a former ally abusing a victim, and this must feel quite personal as well. So as all this chaos unfolds, I'd love to hear what you both make of it.
Maybe Operator Starsky can start.
Okay, so if you want to find a good way to battle this psychologically, right? If you want to improve your psychological resilience, I have a very good recipe. Yesterday, I made a bunch of pancakes with chocolate, like with chocolate filament, but with Nutella, and it tasted absolutely fantastic. And those were my first pancakes I made in my life, and they were perfect. Big stress, and we need something to reward ourselves. That's something that I always do when I'm under stress. But generally speaking, the current situation, I think we must honestly thank Donald Trump. We must be grateful to Donald Trump, because having such a backstabber in our team resulted in Europe literally ramping up its defense, taking important decisions, and most probably soon we will also see European jet fighters helping Ukraine protect its sky. So I think despite all that, despite Trump administration being an open, I would not call them an enemy of Ukraine, but they are not like, they don't consider us allies. So having all that, grateful for this opportunity to finally be stronger and more decisive. That's my opinion.
Anna, pancakes, is that your solution too, or do you have something?
No, and I actually wanted to say that perhaps I'm a more aggressive kind of person, imagining a kind and good Operator Starsky making pancakes and me doing Trump voodoo. Well, I will be honest with you, and if we spoke yesterday, I would tell you more bad things than, for example, today. So all of that is very just like roller coasters, because I won't lie that witnessing this real, extremely quick betrayal is not something we here expected in Ukraine, in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, and it's not okay. And sometimes I am a bit angry when I hear from the people who support Ukraine in different corners of the world advice that you have to do it in a different way, or you try to persuade MAGA to understand this, forgetting in the context in which Ukrainians already live for 3 years, being very strong, very resilient, and without exaggeration, I'm not sure that many countries in the world would manage to do what we do. So at this moment, my main message is that observing this betrayal of the US policy, not just Ukraine or Europe, I am sure that such dramatic shift cannot happen overnight. That, like yesterday, Russia was the main enemy, and Russia was responsible for the interference in the US internal politics. It was blackmailing people, and it was quite obvious. And then tomorrow, it is the best friend, and we put tariffs on Canada, but we lift sanctions from Russia. It's not okay. It's just like 180 degrees turn, not 30, not 45. At this moment, I am worried that not only they close intelligence for Ukraine, but they also open intelligence for Russia. This may happen, and this will not surprise us. We are prepared. We knew it coming, but we didn't think it would develop that quickly. I'm sure people in Britain, in France feel the same way. I can't say that, like, of course, it makes us stronger. Nobody wants to surrender, but at the same time, with no satellite images, with, access of Russians to the US intelligence data, of course, there will be a lot of problems. And my main message, if you see that something really wrong is happening in your countries, react until it is too late. And trust me, millions of Ukrainians actually say, how do they allow this to happen? I'm not talking just about Ukrainian issues, forget about Ukraine, but look at some other policies that take place inside the United States. I'm not sure people are satisfied, but they obviously do not demonstrate anything. They just watch. If we keep watching for a year, um, all the world will be in great trouble because um, even as General Zelenskyy said, whom Trump thought he could support maybe exchanging for Ukrainian president, he said, Trump is breaking the world order and we will not get the next one tomorrow. We will have no world order and Putin and Xi.
And this is the irony, isn't it? There seems to be, and this is, I'm cynical by nature. You can't observe Russia for 30 years and live in a commonalka without being, quite cynical about things, as you know. But I suspended some of that cynicism. I suspended my worst case scenarios that I mapped out because some of the initial signals seemed to be that Trump was, making certain noises, appointing certain people. That now seems to me as if it was a puppet show, as if it was a kind of maskirovka. But there are still many people who are giving that benefit of the doubt, who are latching on to kind of optimistic ideas. I would encourage them to look at the speech of Kellogg yesterday. Kellogg has been to Ukraine. He knows Ukrainians. He's been under missile and drone fire. And yet he compared Ukraine to a farm animal that you have to beat with a wooden stick. Not only is that despicable, it's evil, stupid, strategically inept, vile. I don't think he believes he's betraying his values, which of course he is. And unfortunately, there are many, many people like him. There are disingenuous people, but there are also people who it now transpires are strategically stupid and morally bankrupt, like Kellogg.
Rubio.
Rubio is a good case, by the way, because Rubio's parents actually came from Cuba, right? His parents were in opposition to the communist regime, and a lot of people considered Rubio like a good guy, always on the side of the United States against communism, against Russia, etc., etc. But on the other hand, guys, we can see a lot of such cases. For example, oh my God, Patrick Lancaster, he served in the United States, Navy. Then there was Douglas McGregor. Russia can buy people. Russia knows how to recruit people, okay? And also, let's not forget that Donald Trump literally fires everybody who don't support their agenda. So if you have your own opinion, it's different from the opinion of Donald Trump, you will be fired, and there are like hundreds of cases already in the United States. So I am not surprised that Rubio also supports Trump, even though you can see from his face that he's not really, satisfied when he was like sitting on that couch and looking at that disgraceful peace deeds taking place in the Oval Office. But eventually he had to write words of support to his president, which was absolutely obvious. So speaking of Kellogg, I believe that Kellogg received quite a big bonus to his, how do you call those? like daily expenses, whatever, when you receive money for your business trip, like on a daily basis.
Oh, yes, yes. I know what you mean. Yeah, just expenses. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, the trip money.
Reimbursements.
So yeah, I believe that he received quite a few extra bucks because, like, he's like, shit, how do I go to Ukraine and survive and then return and talk shit about it? Like, I believe that he received quite some extra for that.
I need to provide a little service here for the users as well. I need to do operatorski translation service. Pizdец. This is clusterfuck, if you don't know.
You noticed how many bad words we have learned during this week or months. I see that my English language vocabulary in that sphere grows really quickly after I read comments of people below Trump's shit show, right? That's the
Yeah.
term we
My
decided
favorite
to
is
use.
cockwomble. I mean, there are a bunch of cockwombles. Yeah.
You see, what do they make with polite people?
Oh, Anna, polite people. I think Jonathan, when he arrives, will disabuse you of that idea. Several days on a train or in trucks across Europe, and yes, Jonathan MS got to know the real me. Unfortunately, absolute, potty mouth.
By the way, continuing the thought of Andriy, I would like to say that there are some people who still believe that Trump is a master strategist and he's playing like 4D chess, and he knows why he like bullies Ukraine. That's a big plan, and then he will bring victory and destroy Russia, which is an obvious BS. But for these people, have a look at Rubio, have a look at Kellogg, whom actually many saw as a strong character, as a pro-Ukrainian person in Trump's environment. Look how quickly they forget about their morals, about their values, about their principles. They betray themselves. And we have videos. We live in this digital era. We clearly see videos where JD Vance speaks about Trump as a modern Hitler. We see Rubio at the start of the Russian invasion saying that Russia is to blame, Budapest Memorandum, Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons, it's our duty to destroy them. And now they contradict themselves like fully. And even if they switch for some particular reason, I don't know, Putin stops paying them on the Ukrainian side or something else, or they say something positive, these are not the people to trust.
Absolutely right. And my point, I think, is that yes, people will be feeling a certain amount of despair, absolutely, but the best way for despair is to take action. And yeah, I mean, this is something that somebody told me who is, I think, a genuine oppositionist. He told me this while he was in Moscow, just the day after Navalny was murdered. Now, I don't want to sort of impose that or go into any of those sort of narratives there. But I did ask him, how is he feeling? And he said his main feeling is absolute anger at the other Russian opposition at this time. Because, yes, they're mourning, but they're falling into absolute despair. They're falling into lethargy. They're just not organizing, they're not doing anything. They're just sort of, as they say, picking at the scabs of their own misery. I said, well, how do you cope with this? He said, I do things. I take action. He said, the first thing I did was call up a charity and help them to try and locate stolen Ukrainian children. I generally believe that's what he's doing, and there's a certain risk. But that idea of taking action, I think, is critical. And this is why I've put this on the screen. For those who watched Jonathan Pierce over the last couple of weeks, you will know that we are crowdsourcing money that goes directly to Dzyga's Paw, who is a fantastic drone charity, one of the leading ones creating not just cutting edge technologies, but cutting edge techniques and how to deploy them. As well as trading programs that allow them to be utilized far more efficiently and effectively. We've actually, and transparency is a big thing. I've known Dimka, who is the co-founder of this, for 2 years. And we met his wife and his team in Lviv. We're on the ground. We could see their operation and how fantastic it is. and we are trying to crowdsource night drones. So these are higher spec, more expensive pieces of equipment, but very, very essential. So anybody, and I know some people will have limitations on what they can do, but if anybody can support this, it is massively appreciated. Also, because Ukraine is a country at war, it makes it a little bit difficult sometimes to make payment transactions. So when you go into the payment window here, you might have to take a couple of different approaches. You'll need to copy my sort of campaign link when you go onto the payment, and it may be rejected a couple of times, but do please persevere. It's not because this charity is not trustworthy, it's because Western banks, in relation to payments going to Ukraine, can be a little bit funny. Starsky, from a military point of view, how important are things like high-tech drones at this point, especially with US intel and data being cut off?
They're extremely important, of course. The problem with US military aid is that there will be shortage of shells. Sometimes drones can be supplanted, okay, by shells. In cases, for example, when there are mobile electronic warfare systems operating actively on the front line, and drones are not really usable there. Also, HIMARS systems not really usable there if there's big EW systems like Krasnucha, for example. So the shells are absolutely vital. But on the other hand, there are drones that are being controlled through fiber optic cables, and those are the drones that we are now building in huge drones. We immediately started building those ourselves. And currently, when Russians did their testing and came to conclusion that they're kind of okay, Ukraine has enormous amount of them already on the front line. And we're using them not only to strike Russian personnel and Russian vehicles, but also eliminate Russian electronic warfare systems as well. It's one of the cool features of such drones. You cannot suppress them using electronic warfare, and also the electronic warfare can become target for them. So it's crucial to have them, of course, and there's also different tactical operational drones, for example, those that can operate between 40-70 kilometers deeper into Russian territory. Those are AI driven, so they're not really afraid of being suppressed through electronic warfare. They are extremely, extremely crucial, not only in terms of striking, but I'm talking about drones that we use for surveillance, for reconnaissance, and considering that currently we will not receive intelligence from the United States regarding this, they are absolutely, absolutely vital for Ukrainian defense. And if we're talking about drones, I think it's a good idea to, again, support Ukrainian is building those drones, or support international companies building those drones, because again, since we don't have the United States anymore, we have to return to good old fundraising for Ukrainian defenders. If you're
Oh, we're losing Starsky there, I think. Is it buffering for you as well, Anna? I think he's dropping. If we get back OS, we'll continue that topic as well. But Anna, I mean, what are your friends and family feeling? In effect, Ukraine has already put up with circumstances where it was written off, where it has, many, even if its allies thought it would fall and it was hopeless. You've come through the sort of dark days of February 22 and many other dark days since. Does that mean that, yes, there's all these sort of shocks and turns, but actually, Ukraine has already been through hard times, so maybe there's a little more optimism than perhaps there is within the pro-Ukraine community, because there's a lot of despair, I think, in many of the people that I'm talking to.
Yeah, you are right, because we are often shocked with this messages coming from the White House, not from the Kremlin, but actually Kremlin messages coming from the White House. But once again, after 3 years of this war and violence, we've developed this, I don't know, self-healing mechanism or something. And I fully support you here in the need to arm Ukraine, to help Ukrainian military initiatives. I'd say military goes number one: weapons, drones, cars, anything that people need on the front lines. And Ukrainians like mobilize really quickly. And I remember recording one of my first videos after all these like very public, very open betrayals, and people in the United States or Europe telling, "Oh, we feel a little bit better because we see that you're not prepared to surrender." Well, I guarantee you that here in Ukraine, no one is prepared to surrender. We know that right now Russia is actually super weak. They have serious problems not only with the economy but with their army. And right now, Trump tries to save this. Why are they so in a hurry with this ceasefire? It's not looking okay, right? Typically, a normal negotiation process can take like years or at least a year. And here we see people wanting to finish that in like a week or a day, which is insane, taking into account you won't have even time to translate, I don't know, the text of the agreement, which is not worth the paper on which it can be signed. So, what happens with Ukrainians in such crucial moments is we get more united, and I think even more determined than we are in this like more or less relaxed atmosphere, even though I don't remember when was it the last time. And this, for example, the support for Zelensky, it skyrocketed after JD Vance trying to humiliate him and humiliating himself. And we clearly understand that this is about the survival not just of Ukraine, but of Europe and of this like Western democracies, of course, including the United States. What we observe right now, this violation of that checks and balances systems and so on, this is also war against this good old America, great America, which is very different from what we see right now. The Ukrainians are praying that during this pause or madness happening in Washington, Europe will mobilize and understand that if Ukraine falls, then, like right now, I guarantee you that the Baltics will be next and Moldova. And no, Trump will not protect them with Article 5. He shouts about that everywhere. He forgets how the only time in history when Article 5 was used was actually for the United States after an awful 9/11, and many countries came to back up because that's about being a human being. So our hope is that all people who have eyes see that. We feel strong messages coming from France, coming from Britain. I think many will change in Germany when Merz is finally to lead. And one more important thing, what is happening, more and more people understand that their armies cannot rely on American weapons, on Starlink, or on American intelligence, because now it all depends on the mood of a very unpredictable 78-year-old narcissist. I'm not sure you want to have a pilot like Trump in your jet. The same is to rely on like American weapons. Today, they have banned satellite images for Ukraine, actually provided by partially private company, which is like insane.
And not just military. Some of that data is commercial as well. So this is
insane. And I'm sure in France, in Belgium, in Denmark, they understand any moment when they need it, it can happen to them. Either when Russia wants to invade or when they have some trade wars or something else, Putin, you see, Trump will want from them. So I believe this will lead to the boom of various military productions companies in Europe. And we actually see that on the stock market. It's all red in the United States. It's all green in Russia, but also we see some positive moves in Europe. Hopefully, this will work out.
And Starsky, I mean, you can appreciate this, I think, well, both of you can, but when Vance made these comments that, and Trump has doubled down on this today, saying, you know, who's going to come and defend the US? So why should we come and defend you? That comes to the back of Vance's comments saying, well, these countries offering to give assistance, security assistance to Ukraine, well, they haven't successfully fought in a war for, 30, 40 years. He specifically meant Britain and France. The anger here of anybody who has been involved in the military, is connected to the military, is off the scale. I mean, to be honest, even since the Second World War, there's a certain, I would say, sort of simmering resentment and rivalry with the US anyway, and there's a certain British attitude that tends to look down on things American. That's not everybody, and there are many people who treasure certain things about American civilization and culture. But there is this sort of simmering pot ready to boil. You just have to prod it and take the lid off. Well, Vance has absolutely done that, and the anger he's caused is unbelievable. So if that's followed up, I think, by UK moves, let's say, in defense of something like Sky Shield, if we actually make more concrete moves towards not waiting for this supposed peace, but actually helping Ukraine to defend itself and be victorious. At least in Britain, I don't think there'll be much pushback on that. People will say, well, how are you going to achieve this? But I don't think there'll be huge institutional or political pushback on being involved. And Lavrov has popped up, as he always does yesterday, to say that any European involvement on the ground means you're directly in conflict with Russia. Well, come on, Lavrov. I'm not sure he'd, come off too well in that fight.
He always says that. Literally, let's just forget about Russian red lines because we know that they are not worth shit. As for J.D. Vance's comments about the UK that didn't fight for like 40-something years, friends, after this stream, please check out Jonathan Pye and his reaction on a YouTube. I would like to, to repeat what he says, but unfortunately I cannot swear so well, as well as this gentleman. He explained everything, okay? Jonathan Pye, you gotta love it. J.D. Vance is a freaking idiot. He doesn't know history, he doesn't know anything about UK's involvement in the conflicts like Falkland Islands, for example, when UK's special forces showed freaking fantastic results in terms of special operations. That is something that people study in the books, actually. And of course, UK's involvement in the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. That is, again, it's a very serious thing because UK replied to the 5th chapter. They replied to the call from the United States to call for their allies to join them and fight the terrorism. And by the way, Ukrainians also replied because there were Ukrainian troops involved in the operation in Afghanistan where we did EOD stuff, and we saved a lot of lives there, not only civilian lives, but also lives of the American personnel by removing the explosive devices that were set up by the insurgents and by the terrorists, and we saved a lot of American people there. So that is another thing. And as far as, for example, our mutual operations in former Yugoslavia, again, when there were NATO troops, there were American troops, and there were also Ukrainian peacekeepers, always working together, always. So that is something that J.D. Vance doesn't know, because why? Why should he know those important things? Why? What's the point? He has a sofa, and his sofa works as like the best observation point, and maybe he uses it for other purpose as well. I have no idea. Uh, but also, Jonathan, I'm not sure if you saw Jonathan Pye's reaction to that, but it's worth seeing.
I have not yet seen his latest reaction, but I'm a big fan of his. In fact, I had the pleasure of actually meeting him when John Sweeney and Kaylin Robertson premiered their film, based on war crimes in Donetsk. This was, I think, about a year and a half ago. Yeah, and they had Jonathan Pye was there. Rather the worse for wear, it has to be said, but then all of them were at that. And very funny, very acerbic man. If you're not watching it and you like bad language, warning, if you don't like bad language, it's definitely not for you, but it is incredible.
I just wanted to add one more thing regarding the peace. Why Ukrainians are, oh my God, Ukrainians oppose the idea of peace tomorrow between Ukrainian defenders and Russian invaders. Why? Why do you want to kill your own civilians? Why do you want to die? Why do you want to lose the country? So first of all, there is no peace strategy by Trump, doesn't exist. Okay, let's just be honest here. There is no war settlement by Trump. He doesn't know how to do it. He never knew. Why he said that he will settle the war in 24 hours? Because he wanted to be elected. He freaking lied to you. That's all. That is the truth, right? Another thing, the only strategy they recognize at this point, the only strategy is Istanbul Act of Capitulation of Ukraine. That was the paper offered by Russians to Ukrainian side in Istanbul. Basically, it's an act of Ukrainian capitulation. That is the only guidepost, according to Witkov, used by Trump administration at this point. They don't recognize anything else. To Trump, peace in Ukraine means Ukrainian capitulation, and to Putin, of course, as well. Don't be fooled. Don't have illusions. Of course, Ukrainians will survive if we just give up and tomorrow Russians come to Kiev. For some time we will survive, of course, but guys, Ukrainians were under the Russian occupation for 70 freaking years. We lost millions of people to Russian repressive machine. And by the way, one thing that MAGA always forget, first of all, two things. Not only we lost a lot of Ukrainians, but also Americans lost a lot of their men when Ukrainian soldiers that were forced to serve in the Red Army went to Vietnam, brought AKs to the Viet Cong army and trained them how to kill American soldiers. Because the core of the Soviet army was Ukrainian army. They don't really remember that. And another thing is MAGA doesn't, I'm talking about the MAGA that doesn't support Ukraine or say Ukraine must give up territory so they would have peace, they would stop dying. So I have a question. If MAGA don't want to share their home with illegal immigrants, then why do they expect Ukrainians to share our home with Russian invaders? What is the freaking difference? I still cannot understand. I'm struggling to understand why Ukrainians must share their home with invaders and Americans should not. Maybe you know the answer. I'm lost here.
No, I mean, there are several interpretations, aren't there? But the main interpretation, and I'm just recording an episode this morning, which is going out later this afternoon, that is it helpful to think of Trump, and honestly debate endlessly whether Trump is an asset or an agent and whatever? The fact is, we will never know, but we need to look at his actions. And I've listed 10 actions that clearly demonstrate he has working to the benefit of the Kremlin and that each of those actions are far more difficult to justify in terms of their benefit to his own constituencies and his own country and the resilience of the US. 10 very clear indicators. This whole asset, is it compromat, is it not? That's actually immaterial. It's what he's physically doing. And my question to both of you is that this is increasingly coming to resemble a kind of state capture, as was exemplified in Yuri Bezmenov. Now, he's a complex character, and there's some controversy about him. He almost exclusively lectured to more right-wing audiences in the US when he was alive, as a lot of Soviet dissidents did. There's a tendency to be rather right-wing if you'd escaped from the Soviet Union and then turned the other way. And of course, so he was meaning that this corruption of the US, he was thinking of it in terms of left-wing ideologies and anti-competitive ideologies undermining the US. He probably never would have imagined for a second that the USSR would fall and they would turn those same strategies to co-opt, coerce, manipulate right-wing audiences. But this is obviously what we're seeing, but the underlying psychological techniques are the same. Those same techniques developed in the 1930s in Berlin as well. So if this is state capture, what features do you see the commonality between, say, Yanukovych's regime that hollowed out the army and hollowed out the Ukrainian state to what Trump is now doing? Anna, to you first.
It's actually very popular right now in Ukraine to compare Yanukovych to Trump. And there are a lot of memes where Yanukovych tries to warn Trump that you are in trouble. I know them. And once again, after that Oval Office shit show, we had a lot of people saying that perhaps before that, Zelensky's mission was to take down Putin. And now his mission doubled, and his task will be to take down Trump with the exposure of this Krasnov. Be he an agent or not, I totally agree with you. Things he does matter, and there is more than enough of proof. And first of all, Yanukovych changed the Ukrainian constitution and returned back more control to the president than to the parliament, from parliamentary presidential to. And it was once again to get the more power. What we see right now, Trump does with American courts, with Congress, like he only keeps people super loyal to him. So right now, even if you want someone else to look at the situation and the decision, you won't have this neutral people around. What surprises me is that people so quickly agree on that in the United States, and repeat what he wants, keep worshiping them. This decision about the illegal protests at the universities. We may speak about some rare cases when it can get dangerous or be wrong, but universities are centers of freedom. This is where future citizens are shaped. And the revolution of dignity actually started from the students' protests who were against the return to Russian course. By the way, this was also this tremendous shift of the foreign policy in Ukraine. When we were moving to the European Union, that's what people supported, NATO somewhere ahead. And how do you say, just like one personal decision, one person's decision, Yanukovych changed it all and said, we're not ready. And people started protesting, specifically students. And the protests grew actually after special services beat the students. And this is what Ukrainian parents, Ukrainian people could not allow to be happening. Together with this huge corruption and businesses coming from Yanukovych, saying that, like, we want to buy your business for 50,000 pounds, and you say it costs 500,000 pounds, and they say, no, you will sell it or you will get into jail, you will have problems with tax office or something like that. I believe similar things very soon, or maybe already, are happening in the United States, because one of the things why Trump plays with these tariffs may actually he helps his buddies to get money to buy stocks that lost price, then got higher price. So this is a very mafia style approach to everything. And at a set moment of time, Yanukovych banned protests in helmets or something, and people went out on the streets wearing bowls. What do you make your soup in? And we went out on protests, and that resulted in the change of Yanukovych regime. And for me, those who speak about the coup in 2013 should actually speak about Yanukovych, who brought to power a lot of people with Russian passports. We had the Ministry of Education with Russian passport, the Minister of Defense with Russian passport, the General Prosecutor.
Anna, do you remember Solomatin? He was Minister of Defense of Ukraine, and he was literally wearing the logo of FSB, you know, to show off.
Maybe, yeah.
Oh
And
my God, no.
by the way, the Minister of Education of Ukraine, former Yanukovych regime, is now a deputy of the Russian parliament. What other proof, evidence do you need that they were trying to hijack the country? It took them a couple of years until people reacted. In case with this super friendship between the White House and the Kremlin in the United States, it happens at this space speed, at the speed of light. It's difficult to, we have this time difference, and every morning I wake up, I drink a glass of water, then I breathe, and only then I realize that I will read a couple of total BS coming from Trump and his ideas. So, what also, it may be on this very like civilian perspective, but I hate all this flattering that comes together with such wannabe dictators. That was true about Yanukovych, where people had to stand up and applaud him for just like half an hour, and he was cheering for that. It looks so cheap. And right now, you see Trump saying, like, I'm the president, I'm the greatest, I'm the best. Putin said, I'm genius. But okay, we know Trump has a number of diagnoses. What about the people who were just like 2 years ago normal, but for the sake of this access to power, they start acting as if Trump is their king, and they keep repeating that. They keep glorifying that. I don't remember people quoting any US president that much, or saying that was the decision of the president. The president said this, the president said. They are not talking about US politics, US people, US attitudes. They only talk about Trump. So this once again proves that, of course, he won't like Zelenskyy. Of course, he won't like Macron. Of course, he won't like Starmer. He wants to be Putin of the United States. That is his like idol. There is no way, no arguments that can change his attitude. And our only solution is to start acting correspondingly.
And for those who are wondering, I mean, how all these politicians are bought off, the palaces they built themselves, the huge, vast sums of money that are required to not just corrupt a few at the top, but an entire layer of greedy oligarchs. You know, you essentially give them access to industries and where they can skim off a huge amount of money. That is a loss to your treasury. That's a loss to the people, tax revenue. It's a loss to, if those have shareholders, a loss to them. This whole exercise of dictatorial geopolitics involves a vast amount of waste of resources and money. And for those who are wondering about Trump, he's going to be wasting your money. He's going to be taking it from the poor. In fact, he already is, stripping it out of the civilian economy, and then he's going to be using it for these wasteful geopolitical mind games. I remember speaking to I won't say the relationship this person had to me, but I remember speaking to a Russian about this. He was bragging about Abramovich buying Chelsea. And I just said to him, like, I didn't say these exact words, but something along these lines. You live like a piece of shit, right? You live a really shitty life, and you have roads that aren't made up. They're rough surfaces, they're stones and whatever. You have buildings falling down. You have I just listed a lot. You go into the main train stations and you have to, go to the toilet in a hole in the ground in many places. Like you're proud of this guy and the fact that he's stolen all your money, and now he can brag about it. And you're proud of, your president. At this point, it was Yeltsin. It wasn't Putin. But the same thing applies. If you expect Russians to be angry about the amount of their money that's been wasted on these geopolitical games and crimes, then don't, because many will feel a pride in that. And it's perverse. And we now see the US going down that same absolute rabbit hole.
I expect Americans to protest because that will be still new to them. Russians got used to that. That is their vision of the world. And Americans are different. I still have hope. I have a lot of good people who are actually very stressed right now. And hopefully, this stress will transform into something effective. But let's agree, it's insane to, I don't know, believe that billionaires, 2 billionaires or more crazy billionaires will fight corruption. How do you just decide that Musk is going to fight corruption and all this conflict of interest and so on? What personally angers me more than their betrayal is that they provide absurd, very primitive answers, which literally don't give anything. When Musk was asked, how about the conflict of interest? And he says, if I will come across such thing, I will not deal with it. Okay, I promise. And people agree on that. This is what makes me angry. Are you all stupid? Are you all blind? Come on, this does not, you don't need fact checking. It's just so obvious. And no, so far, so good.
It's not going well, is it? It's like
I
a
would,
meme in real life.
I would add something to this because generally, the biggest difference between Russians, Ukrainians, and Americans is that Russians don't protest. Okay, they don't know how it works. They don't understand why. They're afraid, and yada yada. There's 1 million reasons why Russians don't protest. That is why they live in shit for centuries, and they will never change. It will be like that forever.
Natural habitats.
Yeah, that is the word. So Americans and Ukrainians are absolutely different from that because we know how to fight against tyranny, and Americans and Ukrainians have very, very special thing in common. We have self-organization. For example, during the Revolution of Dignity, we were extremely self-organized. We didn't care about chain of command because it didn't exist. Basically, there were 3 politicians who represented our voices, and basically
Later.
that's it. Yeah, later. And basically that's it. We were self-sustainable and we were self-organized. Americans have that too, big time, actually. I'm not sure who learned from who, but American people share that. So I'm sure that, and by the way, the protests are already taking place. I remember several days ago there were protests from 50 states. They were online, basically. You could watch them on a YouTube. But I think it will become probably a trend in the United States very soon. Probably we'll see something like that. However, again, we can see very disturbing changes. Again, that is just my opinion, but I can see disturbing changes when people responsible for some very important sectors are being fired, when authorities are being fired, when CIA employees are being fired. And that is very, very disturbing because who remain working there? Basically, people supporting Trump remain working there. And in my personal opinion, that is kind of sketchy.
Let's turn to Sky Shield as well, because there's been quite a few comments here, quite a bit of debate. I am not a military expert, and you're not a guy on a plane, OS. You're a guy on the ground. But should we now be moving towards this idea of Europe, Britain especially, being more involved? We have French fighters actually that last night tried and succeeded in some cases to tackle the missiles and so on coming in. Should European powers, possibly led by Britain and France, provide a more active sky shield to close the skies over Ukraine, not waiting for peace, but stepping in now? Now, listening to Lavrov's words, yes, that puts us in some form of direct confrontation with Russia, but it's not on Russian territory. It's on Ukrainian territory. So do you think that's something that should happen now? And how can we, in our own small way, promote that idea and popularize that idea amongst our communities? And what should people do to try and put pressure on politicians to make it happen?
I think it should have happened long ago. And honestly, it's very, very wrong, very inhumane that having enough air defense systems or potential to provide this Iron Dome, Sky Shield, this decision was not made. You know that one of the reasons why the Kremlin cannot be forgiven is that even if we consider unprovoked war to be this like problem, they do not follow the rules of war and they target very many civilian objects. And those, even people who do not follow news from Ukraine, witness that different cities, hospitals, schools, residential buildings, for example, a hotel in Kryvyi Rih last night, where a lot of volunteers coming from the UK, coming from different countries, often stayed. There is no explanation. It is pure terror and a very vivid war crime. And unfortunately, there are dozens of thousands of such. And as a linguist, by the way, I am surprised at how many politicians and journalists allow Russia to manipulate and set these red lines where they are even inappropriate. People speak about this direct conflict between Russia and NATO countries from the very obvious perspective that would be NATO jets, NATO aircraft bombing Belgorod region to destroy, I don't know, Russian arsenals. That would be a direct conflict. Here we are talking about Ukraine. It is an independent country that can allow or not allow the presence of foreign troops, NATO or not NATO. Russia does not have a veto in NATO. This is a great mistake that Trump keeps repeating. But in general, it's very wrong if we allow Russia to make any decisions. So we have an independent country in Europe that asks, begs to save our children, our hospitals, our schools, our infrastructure. And we allow, we actually invite, we beg, we pray for that, to come and simply stop the missiles that are targeted on our schools and our hospitals. We are not asking to target Russian arsenals, Russian airfields in Russia. It's about stopping the missiles, stopping, I don't know, the drones or anything else. It is very moral, it's very correct. And, we all discussed that precedent when a Russian missile was in the Polish space, in the Polish skies, and they did not stop it because they were afraid it would be a direct conflict with Russia. A question: what was that missile doing in the? Why aren't Russians afraid of the direct conflict? We know they are exhausted. There are no red lines. Ukraine is asking to defend Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian children. It's about stopping the instruments of matter, stopping the instruments of war, just that. And I think it should have happened long ago. Observing this betrayal online, I think it's not just Christian, it's not just right, it is also good or practice, you know. Unfortunately, Chinese and North Korean soldiers already get a lot of useful skills on the front lines. It's not about front lines. It's about just make this decision. Think about that. Would you like to save a Ukrainian child having this opportunity, or you prefer not to?
And I guess from a military point of view, it's more than just planes, isn't it? Would we also need to provide considerable logistics on the ground, as well as air defense systems to protect those assets if we were to put more Western jets into Ukraine, possibly piloted by Western troops?
I don't even see a reason why they should be there because, generally speaking, they can take off on the territory of Poland, Romania, or Bulgaria. It doesn't take much time for them to reach Kyiv. I believe it takes approximately half an hour to reach western border when you fly Boeing 737. So it doesn't take much time for them to reach to scramble and reach the territory of Kyiv, Oblast, or Odessa, or Lviv, that is literally across the border from Poland. So I don't even see the necessity for them to be stationed in Ukraine. Also, when there is a risk of upcoming Russian missile strike, they can always scramble prior to it and just patrol the skies. So those guys know how to plan, and I don't think that they will need to be stationed on the ground in Ukraine. Again, returning to, for example, Russian red lines. Okay, Russia doesn't care about asking approval from NATO countries in order to bring the North Korean troops to its territory. Like they don't give a slightest damn about anybody's opinion. They just do that. At the same time, why should we be afraid of them? I have no idea.
Anna.
I have a question, just a question. Don't you think it would have been a proper answer after North Korean soldiers came to fight for Russia?
Yes. I mean, I think it would have been an appropriate answer after the Russians were pushed back from Kiev.
Yes, but
but
if we are even if we are very, very, very accurate, like we don't want to escalate, but wouldn't it be very just like logical?
Yes, it would. And now we have reports that not only are there numerous Chinese observers, there has been for some considerable time, learning and observing in, let's say, the advances in drone warfare, there are reports, unverified, of course, at this point, that China is thinking of sending troops, as North Korea did, to actually fight on the ground to gain battlefield experience. That is, to my mind, in fact, the introduction of North Korean troops, that is the declaration of a world war.
Can I share my opinion? And I will have to leave, so I will leave the floor to Operator Starsky fully and the friends who will join you later. I think it's quite obvious that North Korean soldiers, Chinese observers, and Russians, they are not accidentally here. They are not just watching or something like that. They are getting extremely valuable experience. Russia has lost a lot of soldiers, but they have learned a lot and they have switched their production into military. They will not turn off this just because Donald Trump said so. And for the democratic world, for Europe, please look at Ukraine. even if you don't care about human lives, if you like are not that sentimental, think about the resilience and skills and experience that we have. And once again, this will continue to more wars and conflicts as long as Putin is not punished but praised with new lands, with new territories. Back to, come on, why would he stop? No one would stop if he is allowed to do it, and not just allowed, but tariffs on Canada, sanctions lifted, options given. So it's obvious that Russia will continue its expansion, and it can move even to Lisbon. It is not measured only like Moldova or the Baltics, but once again, with the Baltics taking, it will be bad for many. It's about infrastructure, it's about logistics, it's about energy, it's about access to ports, it's so many things. And here we have Ukraine that not only knows how to fight this modern war, but does it actually very well right now against 3 nuclear countries with US and North Korea on the Russian side. We're doing it good. We have a lot of companies arriving, producing drones and so on. And actually, a lot of American weapons were quite outdated, not just because they are old, but because they do not fight in this modern wars. It's a different kind of war. And you can save this country, Ukraine. You can help us, just help us survive. And you will get a super bonus. You will get a strong military country prepared to defend ourselves and you too. A leader that will train your soldiers if needed, that will share the experience, that knows how to improve the drones, how to do something, so many things. So losing Ukraine, you not only like do a very bad thing for millions of innocent people like me and Andriy, because come on, if Russia is here and we stay here, we will evaporate, we will disappear, you will not see us, you will not hear us. This is what happens on occupied territories. It's not just like a different flag on the city council. And or you can have a good leader of the military. Moreover, I know that in many armies of Europe, soldiers are not very excited to fight. With proper equipment, with proper intelligence, with no delays, with some investment into Ukrainian military, we can be the military. Well, we will find people. And once again, if it's about the defense, if it's about the trustworthy support, because come on, these 3 years of Ukrainian war are constant obstacles in our way too. The 6 months of delay of US aid were tragic for the front lines. We've lost a lot of people, not just territories. Our counteroffensive was very successful. Right now, I see it was not politics. It was not an election campaign. It was Donald Trump once again saving Putin when we could have ended that. So simply creating a normal environment, we can do a lot. And you will have these strong fighters, these scientists, these researchers, these practitioners with you, or you won't have any. And I'm not sure that Europe is prepared to fight against China and Russia together with no American support at all.
No,
Because that's the reality.
That's clear. Definitely. Anna, thank you so much for contributing. I know you have to dash off. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this unity. United we stand. And
there we go. I get it.
I believe that the truth will win. This is so important. And one of the main reasons why Zelenskyy did not accept these lies, because the truth in this war is very, very important. If we will start equating a victim to an aggressor, we are going to make a big mistake. But I know I'm very grateful that many people see the truth and remain united. It gives us way more chances to defeat that Botox dictators either in Washington or in Moscow.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye,
Absolutely.
guys. Thank you.
Speak soon. Bye.
Bye.
And OS, that I think people fail to realize, they use this term peace all the time. The media uses it, even those who are critical of Trump, using the word peace and negotiation and over and over and over. The minerals deal is just a business deal. And it's my view that that provides no security whatsoever, and that there are people who are, I think, kidding themselves that somehow, if they're American contractors on the ground and there are American investments, that somehow they will protect Ukraine. Well, I've just recorded a video this morning saying, hang on a second, you know, that didn't prevent Russia invading Georgia. It didn't prevent Russia invading Crimea. It didn't prevent Russia invading Ukraine the second time in 2022, when there were plenty of US investments in those places. What people are also missing here is that Trump can quite easily make a deal with Russia so that these territories are Ukrainian and he digs the minerals out of the ground. These territories are given over to Russia or Russia takes them back. He can still dig the minerals out of the ground and make a profit because he will make a deal. He may already have made a deal with Russia. So he doesn't care who wins and who loses as long as he profits. But I think his psychology and the informational bubble he exists in tells him that Russia is the bigger, badder, nastier player and is the one that's likely to come out on top. So if you want to keep your business deal, that's, in his mind, the better person to be allied with. For him, it's a win-win. Ukraine survives, I win. Ukraine disappears, I still win. Have you heard that really sort of mentioned? And why are people avoiding what seems to me probably the most obvious scenario? Because Putin has already offered access to Russian, mineral extraction on Russian soil. He's already offered access to mineral extraction in the occupied territories, which, to my mind, is already against Budapest Memorandum. It's against, United Nations, various votes. It's against the principle of any kind of sovereignty, and these things are already there. These are already fact that these discussions have taken place. What's your thoughts?
Budapest Memorandum, we can forget about Budapest Memorandum because, generally speaking, Donald Trump doesn't recognize international law, international recognized borders. He wants to buy Greenland and things like that, make Canada 51st state, which is, if I was a politician the level of Donald Trump, I would feel embarrassed even from saying those things. But apparently he doesn't care much. We know that he's supported big time by Elon Musk. Elon Musk back in, I believe, 2022 or 23 already proposed to change Ukrainian borders. Well, because, why, while the very fact the international borders exist and are recognized, that is something that eliminates 80% of all the conflicts in the world. Because if you want to live in Russia, you take your children and your wife, buy tickets, and you go to Russia. You don't need to change borders to live in Russia. You can just change the country. That's it. That's why since 40s we have international recognized borders, and they work. We don't have much wars in Europe, for example, since the time. As for the mineral deal, first of all, I believe already last year during the elections, sometime even before the elections, I already talked that Elon Musk, I didn't talk about Trump, but Elon Musk apparently can be interested in buying stuff, for example, like lithium from Russians, because why not? Russians can offer him a lot of Ukrainian lithium. I talked about it already last year, and in some of my previous videos, I also mentioned that literally Trump can buy resources from Russia cheaper, maybe more expensive, maybe cheaper, but still he has such opportunity because Russia controls big chunk of the Ukrainian territories where those resources are harbored. It's so funny to see people commenting that if Zelensky signed the deal without security guarantees, that would guarantee security because there's American companies and everything else. First of all, the mineral deal is not about security, it's about return of investment. Nothing else. That is about return of $350 billion allegedly spent on Ukraine. Allegedly because the Ukraine aid tracker explicitly says that there is something approximately $280 billion spent overall by the United States and European Union on Ukraine defense. So that is the numbers that are combined, and it's so funny to hear him saying that like there will be American companies, but like don't be afraid, everything will be fine. Guys, Trump is afraid to send American soldiers to Ukraine, and at the same time he thinks that he says that American companies, American workers presented there will save Ukraine. That is a freaking nonsense because there's so many companies right now being on the occupied territory of Ukraine, being completely looted by Russians, and they're happy. Russians like to loot shit. When they came to Georgia, we saw that for the first time in 2008 when they were looting all those military bases, snatching like light bulbs and electric sockets.
Oh, Wes, I don't know if you've seen this. There's a cartoon, a satirical cartoon from, and it is a German one, I think, but it's a satirical cartoon from the First World War, which shows Russian troops with a kind of ox cart loaded up with toilets.
Yeah, but generally speaking, you know, I have Jonathan. First of all, hello. Welcome to our stream.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, let's plot something. Let's roast somebody. You know, people who respect Trump must understand one thing. In Trump's mind, if Hamas terrorists wear the Z patches, right, and pledge to Russia, then basically they can do whatever. Trump will not support Israel after that. If Mexicans invade southern states of the United States wearing Z patches or like Russian tricolors, Trump will not do anything, okay? This is the success story. Like, if you want to invade America, just invade America with, like, wearing a Russian tricolor, Russian camouflage, and you will be safe. Because the most what you can expect is Trump to say, don't fight, make peace. And you will make peace, and you can, like, literally occupy somebody's house and things like that. That is the same, like, absolutely the same shit that happens in Ukraine right now. Again, if MAGA doesn't want to tolerate the illegal immigrants, why should Ukrainians tolerate illegal immigrants from Russia on our territory that come to Ukraine with tanks and weapons? That is mind-blowing.
Ukraine probably have the best immigration. You know, if you talk about all these like people are like really big on immigration, we should be shooting boats in the English Channel, and we should be, you know, not just putting up walls. We should be like, actually, the Ukrainians have the most robust immigration policy in the world, which is like we shoot people that come from the east. We're like they come across our borders and we blow them up.
I can confirm that because the other day I saw like that Russian bukhanka, you know, literally flying over all speed limits down the highway in Donbass, and like Ukrainian police literally just sent a drone, and it was Ukrainian police. It was Lut brigade, the patrol police brigade, basically. And Ukraine is a tough country nowadays. Instead of like getting a ticket, you just get blown up by a drone. That's sketchy.
So I don't know. Sorry, Jonathan. I don't know what you guys have talked about. I missed joining in. I had to go and pick my son up who's ill from school. So you probably talked about all this already. But for me, like the question is, how do we change Trump's mind? And the answer for me is you probably don't, right? And he's got enough people around him that are so ideologically against Ukraine and compromised by Russia in significant ways that I don't know that you can. So, what's the best outcome? Well, I think the economy is going to have a lot to say, and that's going to be defense, military industrial complex of the US lobbying Trump to say, don't do this because this is hurting us, and you really want the stock market to be healthy, and you want jobs to be healthy, and you want profits to be healthy. So, annoyingly, it's not going to be a kind of moral, political, strategic argument. It's going to be just a purely economic one. And if the US stop getting orders in from Europe, which they will do, which I think they're already starting to feel a bit of heat there, stock market difference between European and American entities is huge at the moment, and there's going to be an awful lot of money coming from Europe that's going to be staying in Europe, from the EU staying in Europe in terms of defense expenditure, actually from Europe, from Norway and UK as well. And I think there will be pressures on Trump in that way. But to finish my thought, really, I think Zelensky's options here are limited to just one thing, which is string the Americans along as long as possible, go and do these peace negotiations with them and Russia, keep on their good side. But if you look at the rhetoric yesterday from Zelensky at the EU and what he said as his Twitter thing last night, his statements, and then look at what he said to Mark Rutte, it seems clear to me that he's actually opting for a peace plan that he is helping to dictate, which is how it should be, because his country that's been invaded, with Europe. And actually the long-term sustainable just peace, it will be done through and with Europe, whilst also stringing the US along for as long as possible. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I suspect that he has to, because the US rhetoric has turned to Zelensky being a warmonger, and anyone who supports him being a warmonger. So it sort of figures they've exactly adopted the arguments used by, I would say, the extreme left in the 70s, 80s, etc., against NATO defending itself against Russian aggression. Then they've completely flipped that. Ukraine is now the stubborn bloc, and we talked a little bit earlier before you joined about the remarks of Kellogg, which Kellogg was the one thing that we perhaps, and they very cleverly, I think this was a ruse, to be quite honest. I think they've used people like Kellogg and Rubio to say, look, we're going to be more impartial here. We're going to end this, but end this in an equitable way. It's now quite clear that not only does Trump not have a plan, he actually does have a plan, and the plan is the capitulation, the weakening and the capitulation of Ukraine. If he can effect it, then some form of coup against Zelensky. He's going to start to realize that the Russian information bubble he exists in, which is telling him that Zelensky is deeply unpopular. I mean, this harks back to the delusions of the Kremlin regime in 2022, thinking that Ukrainian government was not popular and it was just a US puppet. They're still persisting in that, and they created, I think, this bubble of information around Trump as well. But of course, Zelensky is popular. He's never dipped below the 50% mark at any point during the war. His popularity now is the second highest that has been polled.
68 is the latest.
60, 67, 68%.
68 today, yeah.
It was 90% when the invasion first happened. This is the highest rating, not just of would you vote for him, but it's the highest rating of trust in any world leader in the democratic world. So to call him illegitimate, to call for elections, to even wish for a coup, well, that's, unless you adopt nefarious techniques, which we'll come to that in a minute, because I think the US under Trump is not beyond trying to do something like that. But, the Kremlin needs to understand that Zelensky is historically popular. And I think Well,
do you think that you were talking about this, the idea of the reality of the situation is that Zelensky is much more popular than Trump and his circle are claiming. Do you think that there will be a clash of reality and perception whereby the Trump administration does actually realize that some of their lies that I think they believe, maybe, I don't know, because I don't know whether they believe this stuff or whether they know it's just complete lies or a mixture of
No, I
both.
think it's much simpler than this. They want him out of the way because that is one of Putin's conditions. They're going through the laundry list of Istanbul, and OS mentioned that earlier. They're going through the list of Istanbul, plus other things they're going to be adding to that, including control of the 4 oblasts. One of these is the removal of Zelenskyy. So I don't think they care whether he's genuinely popular or not. They were perhaps hoping that he might be unpopular and they could try and foment some kind of elite coup against him. When they realize that that's not possible, they will try to find other ways to have him removed.
But it's interesting that Keith Kellogg last night, did he not say that we can't do it on Istanbul? I don't know whether that was just, you know, trying to redirect, but he was saying
he has no power, right? None of them have any power in this, do they? I mean, whatever they say, they'll flip-flop around. They will contradict themselves because ultimately, to maintain their positions in the government, they have to show loyalty and fealty. We're all still in the rational world trying to interpret their words and associate their words with values. At this point, we have to look at it in a Putin-esque way. Words and statements no longer have value in themselves. They are merely a signal as to whether you are loyal to the Tsar or not. If you do not parrot whatever nonsense you're expected to parrot, you'll be removed, and it's as simple as that.
I'm so used to doing these StreamYard hosting these myself that I was just trying to press on someone's comment to putting it up on the screen. Like, Cheryl, that's a great comment. Well done. I can't
give you permission to do that? I don't know how StreamYard works.
If you can't easily, but you can make someone. You can make someone an admin. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes. Well, let's see. Same with screen sharing, I'm guessing as well.
I can screen share, I think.
You can screen share, okay. Because we'll bring Dzyga's Paw up the donation screen. You're much better at explaining how people should donate and associate it with a particular campaign than I am. But OS, you're a Russia watcher. You understand how that sort of criminology works, that vertical of power. Are you seeing that sort of extreme puppetry and theater and artifice that is the Russian political system, the systemic, opposition being part of that puppet show? Are you seeing elements of that being reproduced in the US political system now?
What I can see is complete absence of any sort of communication strategy. Okay. They don't have plan, they don't have strategy regarding Ukraine and Russia, they don't have strategy regarding settling the war, etc., etc. They also don't have any sort of communication strategy. They introduced the tariffs against Canada, then they removed tariffs against Canada. They said that Europe should step up and deal with the war in Ukraine, right? They say, like, whatever happens in Europe is Europe's business. We have this beautiful ocean separating us. But at the same time, Europe starts supporting Ukraine, starts ramping up the defense budget, etc., etc. He doesn't like it already, They have a lot of contradicting narratives because they don't have common strategy. It was also clearly seen, for example, during the visit during the summit in München, right? In Munich, where all sorts of politicians were saying different things, absolutely, because they don't have any clear common vision. So they don't have strategy whatsoever. I have a small assumption though that they actually have strategy already, and strategy literally cutting military supplies to Ukraine, forcing Ukraine to capitulate, and yada yada. But they don't want to talk about it openly. That's why they're making hints, to the European countries, guys, you're doing it wrong. When J.D. Vance in München was literally scolding people, scolding European leaders, what you do is completely wrong, scolding there about democracy and things like that. That looked absolutely ridiculous. So what I see now is, first of all, that is complete lack of strategy. It's just a fact. They don't have it. And second of all, a lot of lies that literally don't mean anything. When I listen to Trump or somebody like, from his team, Trump administration, so to say, I don't care what they say, because whatever Trump says in his True Social, it's like a lot of bullshit. Literally, things that can be debunked like this, but he keeps repeating them over and over again. And whatever he says just doesn't make sense. So I'm not even paying attention to what he says, but the very narratives give you some approximate understanding where he's leaning to, if he wants Ukraine to capitulate and things like that. Because he will not be saying that openly, because 70% of American population, according to the poll conducted by Reuters and Ipsos, they confirmed that 70% Americans, that is 62% in that number, 62% Republicans and more than 80%, I believe 80% Democrats, they still believe that, they will not change their mind, that Russia indeed invaded Ukraine. Russia is the one to blame. Russia is the enemy and the adversary. Trump understands that. That's why he won't be making those statements openly that he wants Ukraine to capitulate. He will be saying that, yeah, we want peace. Russians will also be saying that we want peace. But in their understanding, peace is not like we just stopped shooting. In their understanding, peace is we stop shooting, and then basically Russia can do whatever it likes to do with Ukraine. Ukraine must not defend itself. That is the main point. That is the main reason why Tucker Carlson went to Russia twice to deliver this message to the American audience, because again, American audience doesn't listen to Russia for the same reason I don't listen much to Donald Trump, because Russia lies all the time and whatever they say is bullshit. So Tucker Carlson went twice to the Russian Federation to deliver this message. First of all, stop supplying Ukraine with weaponry, and second of all, make Ukraine stop defending itself, because Russia wants to achieve victory in this war. So that's my opinion.
Can you bring up? But no, I'm going to talk about that in a second. Yeah, no, we will come on to that, because I know it's hugely important, massively important. But can you bring up Benny Pye's comment a bit of the way up? It's one about Europe and defense industries. So if you can scroll up to Benny Pye's one, because I think like what the US is trying to do is basically the strategy is to get twofold. It's to get Trump a Nobel Peace Prize, and it's to get Trump big deals, transactional deals with Russia, like getting into bed with Russia. They're just fully aligned, and whether there's compromise and all these other things as well, but it's like there's some kind of benefit for either Trump personally or the US and Trump in terms of doing very close work with Russia. So that's what they want. They don't care about the war. The war needs to end. It just needs to end. There's nothing to do with justice. Trump doesn't care about Ukrainian people. So it's exactly like that. So Benny says the US has the potential to be really disruptive to Europe's defense if it chose to be. They could cause mayhem given all the US military equipment or equipment containing US tech we have. Now, this is absolutely true, but there's a really interesting dynamic that goes on here, that the more the US annoy Europe, and the more they do things like that are purely disruptive, the more that they are very obviously coming against Europe as an adversary, and the worse that will be for the US in the long run. It is not going to be good economically and politically for the US to go full on anti-Europe, and you will start getting a lot of people in the political and economic and military spheres in the US really kicking off about that. So I think that there's a really interesting dance that's kind of playing out at the moment, that the US wants to diverge from the EU and Europe as a whole, but also needs us still. They need us to buy things. They need us to order defense stuff, and they need us for protection. Like those bases in Europe that they're talking about, like pulling them back from, like we've got American nuclear warheads potentially in RAF Lakenheath and other places in Europe are really, really important for the US power projection in Europe, in the Mediterranean, and then access to the Suez Canal, and then the Middle East, and then going eastwards. And the more that the US pisses Europe off, the more the obviously less power projection the US will have. And it's one thing to be kind of isolationist, but then the realities will come home and bite, and there will be all sorts of people lobbying. So I think there's a really interesting dynamic where Trump is going to want to try and find a sweet spot of both isolationism and expansionism, because he wants to take over Greenland, he wants this and wants that, and he doesn't want his defense companies to be absolutely haranguing him. So I think the more, yes, the US can disrupt our defense articles and equipment, but by doing that, they will then wake up a sleeping giant, and there will be that's effectively war against Europe, and he's not going to want that.
I mean, to an extent, though, the lack of dependability is already there. Even if he flip-flops and he does one thing and then another, and then there's a reaction, and then he panics and rows it back, such as the tariffs against Canada. They're on and they're off and they're on, because he didn't expect Canada to slap back so hard.
Yeah, so much to say about that. Yeah.
But the fact that he's making these moves and then not connecting them to the loss of confidence in US as a military supplier, loss of confidence even in the US kit that we actually have, and whether that's going to be operational if we ever had to use it directly against Russia. In some ways, it doesn't matter. He's already burnt that confidence. So if you forward project to future defense contracts, people will already be minded to not consider the US. Germany, when Merz comes in, I really wonder whether they're going to be looking at this 10 billion deal to buy F-35s and thinking that they should really pull the plug on that. When we look at future nuclear deterrence, the next generation of nuclear deterrence will be a system co-developed between Britain, France, and Ukraine. Just sort of throw that one out there.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting when you look at the Taurus missile that Germany might say yes to. I mean, hopefully they do, because the Storm Shadow can't be used now. The Storm Shadow requires targeting that uses American intelligence, and there's news coming out that they literally can't use the Storm Shadow now with what the US has done. Now, I was just listening to, it might have been General Breedlove. Someone was just on Times Radio saying that there are rumors that the US has allowed military aid to start going again, but they're not allowing intelligence. But even with military aid, I mean, that will only go on for so long until they run out of...
That was court orders, potentially. That was potentially court orders tackling US aid, which has started the flow again. So I don't know whether this is something they really wanted to do, or some administrative, that'll start to come out, I think, in the next day or so.
Can you show that tweet that's lined up? Because this goes to what you were just saying, Jonathan, about the alignment of the Republicans, maybe, or certain MAGA Republicans with Russia. You were kind of talking about this, and this is really interesting. Sort of like, I don't know if people have seen the moral compass or the political compass. People like Jonathan Haidt and whatnot have done. This looks like they're using that to some degree, but the US is now closer to Russia than the West in many of its values, liberal values and attitudes to international cooperation among countries' political movements. So this is the international cooperation scale, so quite a similar thing. Liberal conservative values, and then more cooperation going up, and then more liberal to the left. So there's less cooperation. If you're at the bottom right, you're cooperating less and you're less liberal. And when you look at MAGA republicanism, which is, they talk about freedom of speech, but they'll shut it down if they don't agree with it. Bodily autonomy, all these things, freedom of press, they're trying to stop. If you look at what Trump is trying to do at the moment, shut down what he calls illegal protests. All these things are exactly what you'd see from Russia, essentially, from an authoritarian leader. And actually, with what the US is trying to do under Project 2025 is more aligned with Russia. And when you speak to some of these MAGA people, they're like, yeah, I like the traditional conservative religious values of Putin, which aren't really actually his values, by the way, but the perception that those are his values, and he's done that, and he's got into bed with like the Orthodox Church in Russia to be able to present this kind of idea of conservative moral values. A lot of Americans are looking, obviously America is a spectrum like any other country, but the MAGA radical populists are looking at this and thinking, yeah, that's kind of what I like. And you're seeing an alignment of the Trump administration more closely with the Putin administration. And I think that's absolutely incredible. I don't know if you got anything to add to that.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, if we relate to this, what is sort of happening here? Germany has moved a little to the right with the new government. They're trying to shore up the coalition. Bill Browder has just shared a tweet on that. But Germany is moving incredibly rapidly, in some ways far more rapidly and far deeper than the UK, because we're still talking about defending increases out of budgetary, not even surpluses, but taking from one area of the budget to another. Germany is looking at actually removing those caps. It's looking at doing something almost off budget, which you would do in wartime, which is a huge ramping up in investment in defense. This is the direct result of Trump's very, very smart, super smart strategy. He is going to cause the largest rearmament in Europe since the late 1930s, larger probably even than the Cold War period. We're about to see an extraordinary change take place, one in which, you know, we keep talking about Russia. You know, they're very good at destabilizing countries. They're very good at trying to you know, bring down governments, as they recently tried to do in Romania. But when it comes to direct fighting, yes, they are a huge adversary, but they have potentially unleashed something which is going to hopefully provide a very sort of hard resistance to their power. That means the clock is ticking, doesn't it? Because if Russia's going to take advantage of their superiority at the moment in numbers, mobilization, and their war economy, they're going to have to do it now, because potentially in 3 and 5 years, Europe will not be, you know, something they can push against, as Lenin said, you know, digging the bayonet into soft matter. They're going to come against hard bone. What are your thoughts there, guys, on that?
It depends. It depends because currently, for example, Russia switched its informational warfare from United States to Europe. In United States, doesn't make sense to conduct and spread disinformation anymore, because White House does it for Putin. But in Europe, we will see a lot of that happening very, very soon. I believe, like these days, they already create and develop different informational operations in the European space. It will take much more time, because Europe is an extremely diverse area with all kinds of different nations that have their own specifics. That is why Russians will have to conduct a serious work there. However, I believe that they already have that data, because several of their strategy communication agencies already did that for Putin in around 2022, 2023 for the Putin's administration, but they will have to develop a new strategy. And there is, again, a very big risk, because one of the reasons why Europe can afford let me rephrase that. One of the reasons why Europe could not afford to support Ukraine much, okay, but why they still were able to afford provide Ukraine, for example, with air defense, with different weaponry in like tiny amounts, is because of welfare around Europe. Because the population of European countries, they're more or less satisfied with their current life conditions. That is why everything's fine. As soon as we will see things like tariff wars against European Union, as soon as we will see breaking of trade agreements and falling export and import between the United States and European Union, and welfare will go down, we will see a lot of marginal parties and a lot of marginal political movements rising in Europe, like AfD in Germany and different far left, far right in Italy, in France. We will see that happening, and that will be extremely dangerous because those guys can literally lead countries to exiting NATO, exiting European Union, and in the end, this can result in Russian paratroopers and Russian peacekeepers literally landing in European countries, you know, to
They don't have to
establish peace.
invade, do they? They don't physically have to invade if they've already hollowed out a country.
Yeah, that's the thing. That is why communications will be extremely important. I really, really hope that European Union will finally pay more attention to this. Otherwise, I don't know. Generally speaking, United States, as far as I remember, is second biggest exporter in the world. That is, as far as I remember, there's China, then there's United States, and then there's Germany, right? And by implementing all those tariff wars, first of all, it will hit United States very, very hard, being world's second largest exporter. I might be wrong, but we gotta check it. And on the other hand, of course, it will hit the welfare of people in Europe, which is already very, very dangerous for political situation in Europe. Because when those mad guys like, I don't know, that Sarah Wagenknecht or
Sarah
whatever.
Wagenknecht, yeah.
Yeah, when she
That's the joke to let the
acquired-
people, sorry, to let the audience know. So Sarah Wagenknecht is the German far left leader that started her own party called BSW that did quite well in the elections that just took place. And she is, and her party is anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia from a far left. So you've got AfD on the far right and BSW on the far left. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Apparently, I will have to sell my Jeep and buy Volkswagen. So, guys, I will keep you updated on this.
Well, you know what? I just, as I said, went to pick up my son from school, and I drove past the Tesla, and I almost wound down the window. And went, "You Nazi!" Just like, I'm like, what have I come to? Some kind of like, yeah. But anyway, there you go. Can a couple of things, Jonathan. First of all, could you show the tweet I've got? Yeah, brilliant. So this is fascinating. So this is an about face for Trump, and this is the very first time we've seen some pressure explicitly being threatened against Russia, and this signifies, I think, pressure on Trump from people saying, hang on, because they've been saying this in the press. They were saying it on BBC Question Time last night. Why is it that there is no pressure at all on Russia and all the pressures on Ukraine? And I think that has actually eventually got through to him. And then Ukraine was hammered with the missiles and drones last night, which I think is what he's referring to pounding, unless it's, I mean, the irony here is Ukraine is doing best on the battlefield at the moment that they have done for weeks and weeks, well, months and months, really. Apart from Kursk, they're really struggling in Kursk, but in the east, you know, they're pushing back a little bit in Chasiv Yar. Touretsk has been really successful. Pokrovsk, they're pushing back in Kupiansk as well. All of these areas, they're seeing some success. So in the light of that, Trump says, based on the fact that Russia is absolutely pounding Ukraine on the battlefield right now, I'm strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire, his weird capitalization, and final settlement agreement on peace is reached. To Russia and Ukraine, get to the table right now before it's too late. Thank you. But as well, like we were talking about tariffs, and I know Operator talked about this, and you, Jonathan, it's worth also, because I was talking earlier about how you change Trump's mind is by looking at economic indicators and economic pressure. He's going to be looking at stock markets and seeing that this week, that, you know, the week in which Trump began pushing Kremlin talking points, says Jay in Kyiv, from the White House, culminating in the ambush and blackmail of President Zelensky, was the market peak. And since then, the markets have absolutely tanked. That's going to be tariffs. It's also going to be the defense industry tanking because of everything that he's doing policy-wise with Ukraine. And at the same time, he's going to be looking at European markets going up. The euro against the dollar today. So the dollar was tanking against the euro as far as I can work out today. So these sort of things are going to be telling Trump something, that this is the way I think that you start affecting him. And also he will be looking at the polls, even though, or his team will, even though he always goes to like really pro-Republican polls and really has a selection bias with the polls he looks at. Confirmation bias. It is worth noting polls like this. So Trump approval poll in 18 to 34-year-olds, he is disapproved of 69 to 31, which is a plus 38 difference between those two. So there's a huge differences there. So you start looking at polls and economic indicators, and it might have something to do with him changing his position here, although that's probably a lot to do with internal lobbying from people in the Republican Party who probably aren't very happy with his approach to hammering Ukraine and not hammering at all at Russia. So I'm wondering what you guys think about this threat. Complete silence.
Complete silence. We're stunned into silence. Now I was fumbling with the mute button as normal. It's kind of interesting because we all know that Russia does not want peace. We know that Russia, when it senses weakness, it's like blood in the water. It's a provocation to Russia. It's a very simple mechanic. Russia behaves like a psychotic bully because that's what it is. So if you're going to build a strategy on forcing both sides to the table, one, you'd have to have a conception of which concessions you're prepared to concede and which ones not. Of course, the Trump administration has no such. I mean, it's taken Russia's conditions and said, yeah, whatever, fair enough. If that makes it end, let's take Russia's conditions. But also, as OS said, you have to apply pressure to both sides. You have to make the economic and political cost of continuing the war unsustainable. He's decided that he's going to do that with Ukraine, and I think fail because European allies are starting to step in. But he has not applied that principle to Russia at all. And how would you do that? Well, I've done quite a few videos, when Trump first came in, not to support him, as someone said. Several people popped up and said I was a Trump appeaser for making these. No, I made some videos that suggested how he could beat Russia if he was minded to. But we don't know whether he was minded to now. It's becoming clearer that he's not. One of those is tanking the price of oil. The other one is enforcing the oil sanctions and shutting down the grey fleet. Another one is closing all the loopholes for components and the sanctions loopholes. And the other one is finally sanctioning all Russian banks and financial institutions. I can't even believe that hasn't been done completely. And applying massive secondary sanctions to China. Well, Trump is inadvertently doing two of these. So ignore all this stuff that he says here, because he might do it, he might not. It may not work. The stuff he's mentioned here isn't actually the key things. The key thing is oil. And the key thing is putting pressure on China to not support Russia. And there is evidence that the pressure on China has worked last year when they withdrew quite a number of support mechanisms from Russia, financial support mechanisms at sort of private Russian business, state-run business, and the military-industrial complex. That's how you kind of tackle this. So until he starts talking about oil, I guess there's not an awful lot that's going to have an effect. What he could do as well is put pressure on European countries to finally take the 300 billion in central bank assets and stop buying Russian hydrocarbons, stop buying oil, stop buying gas, stop, for goodness sake. Even some countries that are fairly bullish on these things, I believe it was Denmark and Belgium lesser, but these countries have been servicing Russian LNG ships, actually keeping Russian infrastructure afloat so it can continue to sell. This has to stop. We are literally putting a noose around our own necks. So these are things Trump could do. And of course, he loves beating up on Europeans, but it's always the wrong reason, but he could beat up on Europeans for the right reasons, stop exporting stuff via Central Asia that gets to Russia, stop buying their hydrocarbons, stop servicing their infrastructure, and start shutting down their maritime logistics. All these things would potentially bring Putin to agree to some kind of peace, and not only on his own terms, because you would literally strangle the life out of his economy.
Yeah, there's some oil price charts there. I don't know if they're worth showing to your audience at all, but just to let you know that oil is, and I don't know that this has got anything to do with Trump, to be honest. So I think this is more to do with OPEC and what's going on with global supplies, interestingly. And I think there might be some tension maybe between Russia in OPEC plus and people like Saudi Arabia, because they would like the price of oil to be beneficial to Russia, and actually Saudi Arabia appear to be playing the let's lower the price game. But I don't know that's definitely true, but I don't know if you want to show that that chart at all. So
let's show that. And of course, Trump's inadvertent actions in damaging the US economy, that is going to lower the price of oil just as a market mechanic, surely, because if you have less production, you have less consumption, you have less demand, that naturally means there's going to be a surfeit of oil on the market, with decreasing requirements.
Yeah, so that's all good news, because of course if Russia don't make as much money as they would like, then they're going to be less able to prosecute the war against Ukraine. So Trump had always had this up his sleeve as something he wanted to do, but interestingly not because it was beneficial to Ukraine and the war. Like that was like, he always wanted to get low oil prices as a way of controlling inflation. But it just so happens that's also really beneficial for screwing Russia over. That's just the happy collateral to that. But anyway, yeah, I thought that.
And also the other aspect is sanctions on China means that the Chinese economy is under more duress and the Chinese currency loses value. And whether it loses value as fast as the dollar, I mean, that's obviously a race to the bottom. But it also means that a lot of the oil that's been sold to China, they have not used the ruble as an exchange rate for that. They've used the Chinese currency. So of course, if you crash the Chinese currency, Russia loses a huge amount of money from those sort of transactions it's made based on oil it's previously sold to China. So there's lots of things that Trump might inadvertently do which would increase the pressure on Putin. Will it stop his aggression? And this is one for Starsky. It's my belief that Putin is so psychotic, he understands so little about the economy, cares so little for his people, that actually, and has so much hubris, as many, I was going to say many in the Russian elite do, as many Russians do, full stop. He will continue to the aggression until the point where he utterly collapses his own system and society.
Just randomly changing the subject, Les in the chat says, please all Canadians in the chat take time to go sign a petition on federal government against Musk and Trump, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I just want to let my fellow, I'm not Canadian, but today I am Canadian. So for the third day in a row, I'm wearing some Canadian apparel. This is a Canadian rugby top. And I'm showing my solidarity for my brothers and sisters in the awesome country of Canada, who are socking it to Trump and his tariffs. So good on you, Canada. I'm here with you. I'm going to buy some, I don't know, maple syrup or something tonight.
Excellent. Well, we'll go to OS for a quick answer on whether Putin has any awareness of where this is leading, and then we will go to Dzyga's Pour and the sign up page, and Jonathan can talk us how you're able to contribute to that. But yeah, OS, first to you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I also want to express my solidarity with brave Canadian citizens and also with brave US citizens who unfortunately have to suffer all this crazy shit.
Great point.
But in my personal opinion, Putin is extremely aware of where it's all going. That is why he wants some kind of pause on a battlefield. That is why we can see Ukraine being cut off the air defense, which are vital for Ukrainian citizens, and other military supplies. Putin understands that he's gonna lose and his clock is ticking. Basically, 2026, that is like point of no return, and Russia will stop collapsing. That is everybody, like all kinds of experts know that. I published the analytics on my channel the other day, speaking about it. This is the year when Russia will face the critical shortage of armored vehicles, tanks, artillery, and finances, which is also very important. That is why they need some additional funds to continue recruiting their terrorists, etc., etc. But regarding those tariffs that Trump is threatening Putin with, guys, it's such a theater. It's like since tomorrow, Russians will not be allowed to chew the chewing gum, you know? And Russians will be like, oh my God, no, oh my God, we're ready. I'm sorry, we're ready for peace. We're ready for the ceasefire. The result is the same. The result is not the peace in Ukraine. The result is pause for Putin to regroup and either attack again or basically reach this moment when he doesn't need to lose his soldiers anymore, and he can use Trump to pressure Ukraine towards giving up territories, which of course will never happen. We all understand that. It's like as soon as he issues some kind of sanctions against Russia, Russians will immediately reply, we're ready for peace tomorrow. We're ready to meet Ukrainians tomorrow to negotiate Istanbul Protocol of capitulation of Ukraine. That's it. That doesn't change absolutely anything.
Let's get you, Jonathan. Let's get this donation up. How people can help again. Avoid despair. Do something. This is one of the best things you could possibly do today, and that is help to source drones for Ukraine.
So, in reality, the best way to avoid despair in this volatile world that we're living in is to look deeply into the eyes of Jonathan Fink and just say, "You are my savior." Let us all be members of the cult of Fink. For one,
drones.
I for one, am right there. I like to wear his special underwear. Anyway, in all seriousness, this is a fantastic charity. We know personally, you and I, Jonathan. I don't know about Operator Starsky, but we know Irina and Dimko, who started this charity. Dimko's now fighting for the Unmanned Forces Service, and but he started the charity, which is one that provides and has provided an awful lot of kit of a wide variety, such as electronic warfare, drones, drone components, very importantly. So when units have drones that are operating on the front line and actually they're getting their frequencies jammed, and they go to Dzyga and say, actually, we need a different frequency antenna, not the whole drone. We just need to change a little bit, and they'll send out stuff like, these guys are awesome. They are wonderful, wonderful people. So and they're also incredibly transparent. So if you pop up to their website and the transparency menu there, you can go and look at where all of their money is spent, how it's spent, and where it goes. So really fantastic. Anyway, one of the things they're doing at the moment is this Triad project, which is for thermal drones, Mavic 3T drones. These are expensive drones because they're good drones and they have good thermal optics, and that means that you are better able to locate targets and much more likely to be accurate. So it improves the efficiency. So it's worth spending a little bit more on those drones to do the work they do. And then they're not like kamikaze drones. These are reusable drones that will do reconnaissance. And I don't know if they will. I don't think they drop munitions. These are reconnaissance drones. Anyway, the project here, for as far as Jonathan Fink's Silicon Curtain side of it, is to raise enough money for I think 3 of these drones, $10,500, and then they go to a particular unit, and then if you donate more than $20, you are put into a raffle. For each $20 you contribute, you have a raffle ticket, and that gets you some merch from Dzyga, a signed flag, and a patch from the unit, and some Lviv chocolate. And as you can see, people have already been donating. This doesn't update immediately.
If you give more than 100 euros, pounds, or dollars, you also get one of my patches. Look at that. You've got a Silicon Curtain patch there.
Amazing. So at the moment, you're about just over a fifth of the way there. And hopefully today your audience can do some serious assistance for these units and for the work that Dzyga's Paul do. Really good stuff. So the thing to remember though is that when you press donate, you're sent down to part of the page that gives you an option to either just pay directly by card, by Swift, crypto, monobank, PayPal, or quick card donation. Remember, paying into Ukraine is difficult, and our banks sometimes stop payments. It's not because it's dodgy. It's just that our banks don't trust Ukrainian banks, even though Ukrainian banks are very, very good. So if you fail with a card payment into Ukraine, fear not, because actually PayPal is definitely will get through. So I've found that PayPal is and you can use your card through PayPal. So it's exactly the same thing, two sides of the square. But if you do that, you have to press this copy Jonathan Fink for Triad, or put some kind of attribution to Jonathan Fink so that they can know what this donation should be put towards in terms of attribute that donation to the particular project of Jonathan Fink. And if you put that in the fields or the description to the payment, then that will be necessary, really. And that's all you need from me. Do it. Do it. Pay.
That is brilliant. And we've seen the guys do it. We've seen the guys from the gang. We've met them. We've seen their operation. They are unbelievably awesome and inspiring. And they've built a team around them who can actually deliver on this. Yeah, heads up to everybody there at Dzyga's Paw if they're watching this. They are phenomenal.
As someone says, as Folk of the Forest says, PayPal owned by Peter Thiel. It's one of those things where there are so many bad human beings on Earth. You just can't get away from somehow putting money in one of these bastards' pockets. Yeah, it's a good point. Well made.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to... Someone's just said I can pin the comment to the top, but obviously it's technical. So I'm technical stuff. I'm trying very hard not to hit the big cross button that says leave studio, because every time I do something, I'm like, don't press the wrong button.
Two things on that. So one, I meant to say earlier when I said I've got two things to say. One is, Jonathan, if you only got one screen there, your laptop screen.
Correct. Yes.
Right. I have three screens. Okay. And
ooh,
one of them is
with my screens. Yeah.
One of them is portrait, and it has three different things on it. And one of them is landscape, and I now cannot do what I do without multiple screens. So I don't know how you can do that. What you do with just one screen.
Is this just because you want to see your side whiskers? You know, your big fluffy face in.
I've got cameras pointing from all directions. Yeah, I'm just like, no. Honestly, mate,
got a butt screen you don't want to tell us about as well. You know?
Screens, monitors are not that expensive. I would massively advise you shell out for at least one.
My son would like it because we could use it for gaming as well. You know, we could get his Nintendo Switch Splatoon, projected up onto them as well.
And the other thing is, when I first had my very first live interview, my very first live, which is on my philosophy channel, and that one in the corner which is end stream or whatever, like I started it and after 5 seconds ended it. And because I thought it just took the camera down rather than stop the whole thing. And so it was an absolute disaster. So I'm there with you, man. Like, pressing the wrong buttons. Cool people do it too.
always a problem with mails and buttons. But yeah.
Unbelievable.
I just want to check with you chaps how you're doing for time, because OS has been unbelievably generous and been with us for the whole 2 hours. So
gee whiz.
I know.
I got a run in like 25 minutes, but I'm not sure yet. I'm expecting a signal from George Soros, because he promised to finally, send me the paycheck for 3 years working for him. But I'm not sure if he will call me in like 25 minutes. If not, I will stay with you, but I will let you know in the chat.
That's it. We'll probably be winding things up about that time anyway, because I'll never run out of things to say. But I've got some other episodes to edit, and I've got a Silicon Bites one where I know, Jonathan, you'd be getting fairly angry say fairly angry, incandescent over the last week or so. And I recorded an episode this morning where I let a little bit of that out as well, because it is outrageous what we're seeing.
I think, you know, I've said this before, but the whole reason that I'm obsessed with this war is the whole unfairness of it. That's what got me initially, which is the big bully country trying to take advantage of, to do one over the smaller neighbor, like, and the war crimes and the invasion and the killing and all of that. Like, it just pressed all of my buttons, and that made me angry. But what's happened in the last 6 weeks with the US administration, the Trump administration, I won't say the US, because there are a large majority, I think, of good Americans who, if they all had access to the correct information, the vast majority of the US would be absolutely against what Trump is doing. But because many of them live in this information bubble of Fox News and Newsmax and Talk Radio and Joe Rogan, they are not being fed accurate information. But like, that whole unfairness thing has triggered me again. Like, my rage at the moment is to do with how can the good guys just turn coat like they've done and have this situation where it's not just David against Goliath, it's David against Goliath and Goliath. And the US and Russia have just, you know, they're shaking hands and they're, you know, lying in bed in a warm embrace. And it just enrages me. And every day I think it can't get worse. It can't get worse. And then today it's like, oh, they're cancelling Maxar. They're stopping Maxar from providing satellite imagery to Ukraine like a private entity. No, it has got worse. Okay, then tomorrow I'm going to be waking up going, okay, what the frick have they done again today? Because no doubt it's some other stupid thing. And just,
well, it'll be sanctions next, won't it? I mean, these phrases that are coming out, we have to intensify sanctions, to me is like, well, hang on, so let's get into the mechanic of what's going on here, because it's Orwellian. Say one thing, do another. Say one thing, say the opposite the next day. So if he's talking about intensifying sanctions, people should expect for sanctions to be lifted tomorrow, not actually intensified. I mean, we have to get into that mindset.
I've long said that the US not giving military aid isn't the end of the world, because Europe can step in to some degree. Okay, it's not going to be perfect, but we can still provide some military aid, right? But stopping sanctions, lifting all the sanctions on Russia is huge, because actually Europe can't step into that. It's something that the US Treasury has an immense, like, they've put the Biden administration's Treasury Department under Janet Yellen and all the people that have been working really hard to enforce and do secondary sanctions honestly, they need some kudos, because I know people said, oh, sanctions didn't do as much. No, they did do a lot. It just takes a lot longer than people think. But Russia is definitely hurting. And if the US was to lift those sanctions, that would be a problem. So someone in your live chat has just said, forget, I think it was it Les again? Les said, ATP geopolitics, just forget altogether about the USA. And I would love to do that. But the problem is, it goes back to what Benny Pie was saying and what we were discussing earlier, which is the US can we can't just forget about them, because actually they can make things harder for Ukraine. They can literally lead to Ukrainians dying, which is what I think's happened in the last week. So stopping aid, lifting sanctions, you can't forget about that, because they are complicit then in potential Russian successes. So then Europe is against not only Russia by helping Ukraine, but against the United States as well. Now the question is, how far did the US push it to help Russia? So, like you're saying, lifting sanctions, if he's gone and said we're going to threaten to put sanctions on, then actually, does that mean it's harder for him to lift sanctions? Or, like you were saying, is it a precursor to him actually lifting sanctions? I don't know. But that tension between the US and Europe at the moment is what it's all about.
You see, Tim Rotunda here in the chat also says they are doing it anyway. So the question is, can we even change Trump's position if he already knows what he's doing, because he's acting according to the plan? Russians in January started massively attacking Ukraine using extended tactics of airstrikes. They now use hundreds of drones together with missiles, and they are also using, let's say, different approach tactics for their missiles. And it started already in January, when they basically knew that Ukraine still has enough anti-aircraft missiles to intercept the drones and the missiles. But it wasn't done to strike Ukraine. It was done to deplete Ukrainian stockpile of anti-aircraft missiles already in January. So basically, in January, they already knew that Trump was going to stop the military supply to Ukraine. Can be a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe in Santa Claus, but not in coincidences, my friends. So Trump is acting according to the strategy that only he knows. And if he wants to introduce, I don't know, sanctions against European countries or tariff wars, or he wants to, for example, lift sanctions from Russia and start buying the oil and things like that, which I see happening, because Russians will say, we're ready for peace. Does Ukrainians that are not ready for peace and Trump lifts sanctions? I predict that it's gonna happen very, very soon. So if he wants to act this way, and he is acting this way because this is what, I don't know, Kremlin expects from him, then there is absolutely no way we can change it unless there is something I'm missing. Maybe you guys know.
Sorry, just there was something that you referenced, which was something to look out for is China. Okay. The Chinese ambassador, was it the ambassador or diplomat Liu Shay? I don't know if he's the ambassador to the EU. Said was it yesterday or the day before? Frankly, he said Trump's treatment of European allies. Frankly, I'm appalled. European friends should reflect on this and compare the Trump administration's policy with those of the Chinese government. Now, this is some brilliant Chinese chess playing. Right, where they have gone, oh, there's this division between Europe and the US. If we just go, oh, look how the US is now treating you, and say we find that appalling, which people in Europe agree with, then there's this agreement between Europe and Ukraine, and Europe, Ukraine, and China. And then suddenly China is muscling in, and then the US is going to be thinking, hang on, like if they start pivoting away from us to China, then we are seriously losing, because China are supposedly our enemy. Some very clever stuff.
I'd like to add in my devious little thoughts in here. Why has China stuck with Russia over 3 years of embarrassing battlefield losses, extreme brutality, and economic loss from the chaos that has been sort of engendered here? Because the Chinese economy is hurting at the moment for various internal reasons, but also as a result of the uncertainty. Why have they stuck with Putin, who is an unbelievable loser? I'm starting to think it's because Putin has gone to them and said, no, just hear me out. Hang in there for a little bit longer, because we can bring down your number one geopolitical adversary. We can take the US out of the game for you, which means that you can then walk into Taiwan. Okay, it's not going to be a picnic, but you have a realistic opportunity to take Taiwan. Just hang in there, because we will take the US out for you.
I think China...
They've tried this before, Jonathan. In 2008, at the height of the financial crisis, it has been reported quite, I think, comprehensively, that the Russians approached the Chinese and said, right, now is the moment to call in all the US debts, crash their economy, destroy them. Let's do this. Let's take over the world. And the Chinese turned around and said, are you out of your fucking minds? And they sent them packing, right? This is round 2, and they're getting their way.
I think China is just incredibly transactional themselves, and they are just looking after themselves, really. So I said right at the beginning of the war that my personal opinion is that China doesn't really mind whether Russia loses or wins, because they gain either way. So if Russia wins the war, then they're like, hey, we're always backing you, and we've been like getting really cheap hydrocarbons from you. And like that's what they care. Like cheap energy is underwrites, you know, economic success or economic growth, and et cetera, et cetera. So they're getting cheap energy because they're not sanctioning Russia. They're loving that. And they are screwing Russia over at the price that they are dictating to Russia. So this is all, that's all good for them. And then they're also selling stuff to Russia now. So their exports to Russia have gone through the roof. But if Russia lose the war, they still don't mind that, because then they go in and pick up all the pieces and they say, oh, Manchuria, oh, you know, Vladivostok, we're gonna have this. Thank you very much. We'll help you back. We've been your friends. We'll help you back on your knees. But by the way, we're going to have these hydrocarbons. This. So no matter what happens, I think China are fine. They're fine with whatever outcome, and that means they're free to just kind of do what they want, and then use Russia in whatever way suits them at whatever time is convenient. You know, they'll just get whatever out of this that they can, but also in the knowledge that 15% of Ukraine's agricultural land they either own or lease. And one thing that dictates Chinese policy, I think, is whether their population, they've got 1 billion people, do they have food and energy, right? That's what they're concerned with. So food security is important. That, I think, is what's underwriting. The one thing they have wrapped Russia's knuckles about has been use of nuclear missiles. And if you notice, they're always strong on that. And that's because if there's a nuclear war, not only will it come over to China anyway, in terms of all of the winds and whatnot, and the fallout, but also that will ruin agricultural land that they have as part of their kind of food policy. And so I think that's what's going on, and they will use Russia in whatever way they can. I don't think there's any ideological alignment. They don't care either way whether Russia wins or loses. It's just, if they win, we can gain in this way, and if they lose, we can gain in this way. And throughout that time, let's not really do anything that makes them win outright or lose outright. We'll just make money off them as in every way that we can. We can push the envelope with making money off them.
I agree on that, by the way. And for example, yesterday, I believe the Chinese representative also said that no, actually Trump is doing wrong, because because United States and Russia cannot decide the peace deal without Ukraine. To me, I'm not a geopolitical expert. I'm not really good at it, but what I see literally is that China is trading with Russia because Russia pays, right? Because why not? Again, I agree that they don't care much if Russia loses or wins, because China wins always economically. And we can also see that China is trying to even increase the discord between Europe and United States by saying those things. However, generally speaking, I think that soon everybody will be saying the same.
It's someone just said, I just said what I said in like 58,000 words. Someone else just said, China smiling assassins. OZ Jeff Gray. And I was like, well, yeah, that sums up what I've said. Smiling assassins. They'll knife anyone in the back, smile about it, take advantage of it. And you know, at the moment they're smiling at whoever wants to be smiled at. And they'll just, I think probably China have played this. If you're to not talk about morality and not talk about what's right or wrong or what they should do, in terms of if you were just China and you wanted to get the most advantage out of everything that's taking place, I think China have probably played a really good hand throughout the course of this war. I don't know.
Well, they've sat back and watched the Western power deconstruct itself. They are possibly unnerved by Europe reconstructing, and part of the security for the future Europe must be to repatriate heavy industry that's moved to China and other places during the globalization phase. So this is not necessarily going to work out in China's favor if Europe genuinely restructures its economies for resilience in the way that Finland never quite lost sight of.
But aren't China now muscling in with So the whole idea is like, okay, we can be a more dependable partner than the US. So they've already got the Belt and Road Initiative going on with, you know, like I've said many times, they've built that railway from Serbia to Hungary. They're involved with Hungary. They've got literally a policeman operating in Hungary. There's this close relationship already inside the EU, the Schengen area, and that's a worry for the EU. But actually, if China can muscle themselves in on this, then, you know, they've not only they've helped to move the US away, or the EU on Europe at large, maybe away from the US, and again, they can take huge advantage of that. And remember that, like I've said a million times, China can play the long game better than any democracy in the world. So the advantage of a dictatorship or an autocracy is that you don't operate on 4-year election cycles. So when you're doing planning and expenditure budgeting, you're like, well, we're going to put in a whole ton of money here and it's going to come to fruition in 20 years, right? And an elected government on a 4-year cycle is far less likely to do that, because they're like, well, we're not going to take the benefit of that. We're not going to win the votes on spending a load of money now that's going to look really good in 20 years time. You know, that's not going to get us re-elected. So people work on real short-term planning in democratic election cycles. China's like playing the long game, the Belt and Road Initiative, and that means that they can just take advantage of other nations and by playing this very long game of chess, I think.
And look at this. This is one, I won't bring up the screen, I haven't got it up here, but it's another one reposted by Bill Browder. And just on the same day where Trump is calling for greater sanctions on Russia, it seems that the American Chamber of Commerce in Russia, which strangely still exists, is calling for removal of sanctions on the country's aviation sector. So we focus on oil, we focus on all sorts of things. But yeah, no, behind the scenes, there are American groups, and this isn't just Trump. There are hundreds of thousands of Americans who are just itching to make money out of genocide and resume their insane, self-defeating, immoral business practices in Russia. And, you know, this isn't just pointing the finger at Americans. Unilever only left the market a few months ago. Unilever is a company that I used to do business with. It's not a particularly nice company. It doesn't have a particularly nice company culture, and I couldn't say that when I worked for a company that had contracts with them. But there are many, many Western companies that still do business, that still, franchise parts of their business or get products into the Russian market, Pepsi being in another. These companies are not just amoral, but they are complicit in the genocide of Ukrainians. And unfortunately, there are many, many American organizations, many European companies who are just itching to get back to doing that evil blood money.
Just above that thing from Bill, I'm looking at Bill Browder now. He said two things that are interesting, just in his kind of news reporting kind of way. Bloomberg Markets are saying that, oh no, I haven't got it up there, but Bloomberg Markets sorry, I'm looking at my other monitor.
No, your other, one of your 3 screens. Yes.
But Bloomberg Markets are reporting that German Conservative leader Friedrich Merz has begun the heavy lifting required to shore up the parliamentary supermajority he'll need to drive through his plan to unleash limitless defense spending. So this is really important. They're going to try and get like this change to the constitution before the new parliament comes in and the coalition is agreed, because then you're going to get BSW, as I was talking about with Starsky earlier, and AFD coming in. They will stop something like that happening. So they need to pass through these things while the existing parliament is in place, to then get these spending rules change and debt breaks and all of this stuff, so that they can then flush the defense industry with a bunch of money and help Ukraine through that. But also Bill Browder is talking about how the Kremlin's rejected the possibility of compromise and refuses to discuss a ceasefire, which could be why, you know, the US has been forced to say, Trump has been forced to say what he said just now, because we're not going to do it. And of course, like I've reported the last couple of days, if you're saying to Ukraine, we're not going to give you military aid and we're not going to give you intelligence unless you sit down with Russia at a specified date to do negotiations, if that requires both countries to agree to negotiations, then Russia just goes, well, we're not going to do the negotiations, because the punishment for us for Russia not doing negotiations is Ukraine doesn't get aid and intelligence. Like, this was blatantly obvious, right? And yet the US was still doing this, and days of punishing the Ukrainians for not doing what Russia was not going to agree to was just massively unfair. So to be honest, Trump had to come out and put some threats on Russia.
I would like to update something regarding this update on sanctions. So, Russian businessman met with the head of the American Chamber of Commerce in Russia, and the Alexander Shokhin, this is the chief of Russia's organization of industry and entrepreneurs. He said that discussions included the lifting of certain sanctions. Among the topics were civil aviation, spare parts, components, and maintenance for civilian aircraft, all issues related to the safety of citizens, according to Shokhin. And he also mentioned that such issues could be at the top of the list. Well, equally, of course, we welcome the return of Russian banks to the SWIFT system and the normalization of payment and settlement of relations. That is according to the Russian representative. So this is how the situation looks like in real life.
Yeah, the aviation industry is something I report on really frequently in Russia. It is falling apart. It is absolutely in desperate need. And so any lifeline that's given is just really helping out the US, unfortunately. Just interesting that Trump tweet about putting pressure on Russia. Radu Hosu, who's a political analyst, a Romanian political analyst, says, warning, any statement coming from the Trump administration for the benefit of Ukraine should be taken with the same consideration as one coming from the Kremlin. Now I'm referring to Trump's, I'm considering imposing Russian sanctions, which shockingly comes after several Republican senators began pressuring the Trump administration today. Is that a coincidence? That's exactly what I said earlier, which is that Trump tweet would have come on the back of some pressure from Republican senators, and that's exactly what Radu Hosu is actually saying. So yeah, this statement by Trump is for internal use for the MAGA base, which is not very friendly to Putin, though. That and nothing more. And he again then goes on to insult Trump, but basically, yeah, be warned. I don't know how serious the US would be in putting decent pressure on Russia, because at the end of the day, they've done nothing against Russia since the beginning of the Trump administration. And I can list you, I did a list in one of my videos earlier of the things that they've done against Ukraine. It's just the list is this long against Ukraine and zero against Russia.
And we should stop paying attention to his words. It's just marketing, and only observe his actions. And as you say, there's a big list of actions to the detriment of Ukraine. I've got this episode coming out later where I actually list all the major ones that I could, but it changes by the hour. But I've gathered 10 of the leading areas that show that Trump is working for the benefit of Russia. And there is really nothing on the counter column where he's working to the benefit of Ukraine and its allies.
100%. Guys, the question is, what will Russia do? Okay, they implement sanctions. Like, it's very, very obvious. They implement sanctions. Do Russians agree to the ceasefire? Do they make a statement that, yeah, we agree to the ceasefire? Of course they do. They say, yes, we are ready to talk about the ceasefire today, even. Welcome to Moscow, President Zelenskyy. We're ready to discuss the ceasefire today. It's not about the ceasefire in Ukraine, and Trump understands this. He understands that the ceasefire in Ukraine, no matter how much he wants the Nobel Prize, etc., it won't solve the situation. Marco Rubio, even despite all of my recent despise towards this man, but he is still is very sober regarding the situation in Ukraine, and he said that we gotta make sure that the ceasefire will not lead to another Russian attack, another Russian invasion soon, or several years. He said that literally 4 weeks ago, probably, in the Senate. And what Russians do, they say, yes, of course, we are ready for the ceasefire. Let's meet behind the round table and discuss which exactly territories will Ukraine give to Russia, and what kind of president will rule the country after Zelenskyy is changed. Russia also wants a ceasefire. They were talking about it a lot, but they were talking about it only when the situation was beneficial to Russia. Nowadays, they understand that they're running out of time. They're running out of tanks, armored vehicles, artillery shells, and there's nowhere to buy them, except, of course, if Trump agrees to provide them some 152 millimeter. I'm not sure he has, but that's the thing. He will say, yes, Russia is like good guys because you see, they agree for the ceasefire. Why don't Ukrainians agree to the ceasefire? Why don't they agree to negotiate their capitulation with Russians? It's very clear what's gonna happen in the future. So it's like I almost convinced that Russians will say, yeah, we agreed to communicate, please leave the sanctions. And in the end, Trump leaves the sanctions, Trump returns them back to the SWIFT system, Trump starts donate and gifting them with whatever they like, saying, you see, that's Zelensky who is a dictator, Zelensky who doesn't want peace in his country.
Can you show the share my screen again? Jonathan, there's two things I want to share with you. So this is fascinating. Trump has been furious in recent days over Russia's behavior, striking Ukraine at the same time the US president is pushing for a ceasefire. Like, has he not been paying attention for the last 3 years? Jesus, wet man. Like, it's like, what do you mean the Russia have thrown missiles into Ukraine when I've been forcing Ukraine to negotiate? Yeah, mate. Yeah, welcome to the Ukrainian war, my friend. That's been going on for 3 years, where Russians invaded, and they've been doing that non-stop. You absolutely.
Is he genuinely angry or not? I mean, at this point, you can't tell whether this is just more bluster and fluff.
Yes, senior White House official could be like, yes. yeah, he was really angry. Yeah, but was it? Yeah, good point.
I mean, the
friends, let's be friends. Let's be honest here. First of all, ignorance is a typical feature for that team, unfortunately, that sits in the White House at this point. Because, for example, J.D. Vance didn't know that UK actually fought in the past 40 years, and they fought a lot. And Trump, for example, only several weeks ago learned that there's actually kidnapped Ukrainian miners that were deported from the Ukrainian territory. He didn't know that.
Absolutely insane.
The dude sanctions the International Crime Court, but at the same time, he doesn't even know why Putin is wanted in the International Crime Court.
Yes. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And I'm going to show you this one as well, because this is a really good point. So the sanction threat on Russia, Julia Davis from Russian Media Monitor points out that note the difference in the approach here. Trump takes deeply damaging actions against Ukraine, so stopping military aid, stopping intelligence sharing, but is merely considering doing anything to Russia. Furthermore, this is the important point, that what Trump is doing to Ukraine literally costs lives, like that costs Ukrainian civilian lives as much as soldiers' lives. But what he's contemplating doing to Russia is merely about money. So actually, we must remember that there isn't a symmetry between stopping aid and intelligence sharing and putting sanctions on Russia. One leads to the death of Ukrainians. One leads to economic difficulty for Russia. That's an important distinction.
It is an important distinction, and what can you say, really? I mean, he may not be genuine, he may be outraged, but if you've watched some of the interviews with Anthony Scaramucci, who's known Trump for a long time.
I like him.
He is quite a character. But they were talking candidly, not just about politics, but about behavior. And the anger, the flash of anger we saw in the Oval Office. From the description of his biographer and Anthony Scaramucci, it seems that behind the scenes, this is the norm. Him getting into rages and screaming at people when he doesn't get his way, and often because he doesn't understand what's going on.
And he did that with Justin Trudeau the other night.
Yeah,
he did that on the phone. Yeah, so on the phone to Justin Trudeau, apparently, like Justin Trudeau called it a colourful conversation, but apparently Trump was effing and jeffing because it was brilliant. And this goes back to the idea of standing up to a strong man. So you stand up to Putin, he's only strong against a weak. You stand up to Putin, he'll back down. Trump's exactly the same. You stand up to him, he doesn't quite know what to do. He's used to. That's why he really liked being on The Apprentice, because he gets to fire people and be the ultimate dictator, but no one stands up to him. That's why he's, you know, the hot mic incident with Steve Doocy, where he's like, I like Kim Jong-un. Basically, he's saying, I'm paraphrasing, I like it in North Korea because when he says something, all of his people stand up with a straight back. I want my people to do that, is what he said. Like, incredible. So he wants to be that ultimate dictator when no one says anything back to him. That's why he's trying to shut down the critical press. He's changing the White House press pool, so there's no critical press and so on and so forth. He doesn't like criticism. So when Justin Trudeau, so what happened is he put these 25% tariffs on, then he was lobbied by business interests, the car manufacturers. So he said, okay, I'm going to reduce tariffs for the car industry for 3 car manufacturers, and then I'm going to reduce tariffs to this level. And he went back to Justin Trudeau and said, look, I've reduced the tariffs to this level. You now need to reduce them as well. And Justin Trudeau went, I ain't going to do that, mate. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to. And he was really strong. And he said, I'm not going to reduce the tariffs. I will only reduce the tariffs when you get rid of all of your tariffs on Canada. And then Trump went effing and jeffing and exploded at Justin Trudeau. And Justin Trudeau held his ground. And then you had these other provincial governors from Alberta and Ontario who are actually MAGA people like Doug Ford and Danielle Smith, who were then saying, and we're going to cancel Starlink contracts, and we're going to do this. And so you've got this massive backfiring of this big, tariffs are going to be paid for by the opposing country and it's going to be wonderful. And I love tariffs, the most beautiful word in the world. And he's getting lobbied by his own industrial sectors, and then it's failing in what it's setting out to do, because actually he's made to look weak, and then he backs down and he does look weak. And he's backed down with Scheinbaum in Mexico and said, I wanted to, goodwill or whatever he said about like stopping the tariffs on Mexico. He's just been done over. It's just poor economic thinking. He just doesn't know enough.
And the scale of the damage he's causing is of course far greater than his first term, but also the damage that he's doing individuals. So, he managed to bankrupt Rudy Giuliani. There was a lovely picture of Rudy on some kind of immobility scooter in Walmart, I think it was, looking pretty kind of pathetic and bedraggled. And of course, he's now bankrupt after, helping to spread Trump's lies. And once he no longer has any political or financial use to Trump, well, he's out of the circle. Wouldn't it be ironic if through all this kind of nonsense, Trump ends up bankrupting Elon Musk, destroying Twitter, destroying Tesla? We're not too far from that.
And his own economy. So he got elected. He got elected on inflation, the economy, and Joe Biden had the best operating economy in the G7, G20, I think. So the American economy was humming along very nicely. All the indicators, inflation was coming down. That was the only issue, but that was, energy crisis, COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So Joe Biden's economy did a better job of dealing with inflation than the rest of these other economies. But everyone's complaining about inflation there because it was perceptions, and people were hurting with inflation. But they're not likely to go, we're hurting, but look at the rest of the world and go, well, our inflation is not as bad as like the UK or France or Germany. So it's all about, well, I don't care about them. My life is bad. So inflation was a challenging one, but actually the US economy is doing really well. I don't think that any single thing Trump has got lined up to do with the economy or is presently doing is going to help the economy at all. Certainly not in the short term. You can talk about bringing manufacturers back, but that's like a 10-year plan. It's not like Dodge can suddenly go, okay, we're going to take our manufacturing plant from Canada and we're going to whack it down in the US in a matter of like 3 weeks or whatever. That's not going to happen. So yeah, maybe there's some long-term benefits by drawing that manufacturing back into the US, but that's a kind of, that's a long-term thing, and there will be pain in the meantime. And I just think he is fundamentally ignorant of economy, the economics, geopolitics, and actually morality. So there you go.
Yeah. And idiots, unfortunately, voting for someone completely incapable of fulfilling a role. And this is the old
that's
law,
harsh.
isn't it?
That's harsh because how do you define idiots?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, down a pub I'll be like, yeah, idiots, but actually in reality it's information spaces and people being disinformed and misinformed, and it's the same about pro-Russian sentiment around the world and in the UK. So yeah, as a shortcut, yeah, but in reality the question is, how do you stop people voting in those ways where when their whole rationale is based on swathes of disinformation?
Misguided,
I gotta
maybe lazy. Yep, you're going to jump.
Sorry, Jonathan. I gotta agree with Jonathan. Sorry, this Jonathan. I gotta agree with this Jonathan that generally speaking, people vote for Trump not because people are bad. Okay, we gotta admit one fact. Trump won because his communication strategy was stronger.
Yes.
I'm not saying that his communication strategy was better. Okay, as a communication specialist with a tiny master's degree in this field, and I participated in different election campaigns in Ukraine before the war, I can tell you that his communication team was stronger. Not better, because when you spread hatred, when you say that Haitians eat your dogs and cats and things like that, and build all your strategy on lies, me personally, I want to vomit when I see that. But as a communication expert who saw that working, I know and I understand why he did that, because he wanted to be elected. And this is, by the way, how he easily tricked all the decent people who voted for Trump, because they expected that Trump's gonna stop the war in Ukraine, because he was saying about it. He was lying blatantly, right? But this is what he said, and people made their choice on what he said to those people. I also agree with you that quite a few idiots voted for him. I know some of them personally, and I agree they are idiots. But generally speaking, 70% of people who don't believe that it's Ukraine that invaded Russia, they're still there in the United States. They didn't disappear anywhere, and a lot of them are good, decent people that were literally bullshitted by their candidate. So
Totally agree.
It's all about communications. Again, as having a bit of communication background, I can say that his team won because it was better. It was backed by Russians. All sorts of Russian bot farms were supporting Trump, and that is the reason, by the way, why he doesn't hate Russia. He doesn't call Russians aggressors, because why? I mean, they helped him win in the end, right? He's not supposed to hate them.
Hinted at that, didn't he? You know?
Yeah. Patrushev and Prigozhin and everybody else. So that is the thing. It's not because people are bad. That is something that I'm trying to say, because currently, I see a lot of Russian bot farms trying to broaden the gap between, for example, United States and Canada, between United States and European countries, by firing at both sides. Russians are very good at it, because we literally saw back in 2015 Russians firing the multiple launch rocket systems in both sides at Ukrainian positions and at civilian residential areas of Donetsk. For example, they do it a lot. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that you can also check them, firing at both sides. And they do just that the same way, because Russians are very, very good at sowing discord, and this is something that makes them recognizable, okay? All Russian propaganda, all Russian disinformation is only aimed at sowing discord. They never produce anything motivational for people. So we gotta remember that we should respect each other. And for example, the MAGA crowd and Trump administration, this is their way of doing business. They don't respect anybody. They like whatever. Same with Putin. He pretends that he like respects everybody. And Jonathan, you know that the way Russians do business, they go, my friend, let's have vodka, we can have business, let's make peace. And then you wake up the next day and you see they're occupying your kitchen, bathroom, and your living room at the same time. This is how they do business. But Trump, for example, he doesn't respect anybody. He says like either it's your thing, you gotta fight your own war, we don't care about it. At the same time, he says we care about it, like because it's Trump. Yeah, but one thing, respect, guys. Holy shit, the worst thing we can have today is literally fighting between the decent people. That is the end of all our, I don't know, all our defense, all our campaign. If we start fighting between each other, nothing else makes sense.
Trust is the key thing, isn't it? Because...
Trust and, yes, trust and respect. And of course, good motivation, because without those three keys things, we are worthless. Remember that.
Yeah, and the number one disinformation tactic, the number one, I would say, the way the Soviet Union was set up, it was designed to be like a sort of, a solvent, like some kind of acid to dissolve trust. Everything was geared to preventing trust from emerging, preventing, coordination, cooperation emerging, and undermining trust was the number one thing. And they've managed to export that very effectively. So yes, I said idiots voted for him, and some were, but just calling people idiots is not going to reestablish the trust, which is essential to reverse, the brainwashing, the mind washing that has been going on.
It's interesting that one of your, I don't know if this is a trollish comment or what, you all sit here and trash Trump and the US and then complain they aren't doing enough. Typical European arrogance. No, it's not. It's like Europe weren't doing enough, and now America have turned coat. So I'm making like, please come back, Matt, and establish an argument that can justify Trump's behavior from a moral, political point of view, and tell us that he knows what he's doing geopolitically, because at the moment he is literally doing things that are resulting in the death of Ukrainians, and that is just despicable. So no, we're not trashing America, we're trashing Trump because of the bad decisions he's making, economic decisions, geopolitical decisions, not having a grasp on history, not like he didn't even know what TPS was when talking about like Ukrainians being the question to him in the White House yesterday about Ukrainians having their refugee status revoked. He doesn't know stuff. He didn't know who was in BRICS. He thought Spain was in BRICS. Like, the guy is fundamentally ignorant about stuff. So
I don't think he knew that Britain had a nuclear deterrent, or France, or there was one of these comments. My favorite, if you bring it up on screen, it's hilarious. Transgender mice. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. So this would have been going on before he did the State of the Union speech, but he brought it up in the State of Union speech, and of course it's not transgender mice, it's transgenic mice. But this has been like a trope, and this is where I don't know whether he is actually knowingly saying that, or whether, because like what Operator Starsky says, it's about communication. Like if his goal is to get people to think in a particular way or to be really anti something, then he knows it doesn't matter if he lies anymore. He can lie openly, and people are like, yeah, and he has he gets the end result. So he's using lying in a completely utilitarian manner. And if you show what I've got on screen there, that is the idea, someone listening to the State of the Union speech saying, we're not paying for your gay mice anymore, you leftist nerds. I can't believe this needs to be said. Transgenic mice are not transgender mice. When you're
when I tried to type in transgender into the comments, that was blocked because apparently that looked too much like spam. But anyway, little aside there, I was a little shocked by that.
And can I just say, just on another, and again, it's about bad economic decisions as well. So Matt, again, I will challenge you as to whether Trump is making decisions that are for the benefit of the American people or for the benefit of his oligarchs and rich friends. So it's well known that $1 spent on the IRS, the American tax department, is $1 spent on them will get you $6 or $7 back, right? So if you're Doge and you're wanting government efficiency, cutting the IRS is the worst thing you can do, because you will cut the ability to generate money through your tax income. It's just insanity. But therefore, when you look at this, breaking the 7,000 IRS agents fired by Trump and Doge. So why you would sack those people is, well, this is why. They appear to be mainly employees who worked in the large business and international division, the LB&I division, which audits companies with more than $10 million in assets and high income individuals. Weird, right? It's almost as if they're trying to help billionaires and cut the revenue of the US, meaning that the middle class will suffer. So the more money you spend in the IRS on richer kind of clients, if you like, or entities that you're investigating, the more money you're going to get back. And it's this end of the graph on the right hand side that they're predominantly cutting jobs with, and that will mean that you will lose tax income, and it's just absolutely insane. But there you go. So, you know, Matt, not attacking America, I'm attacking some American leaders and politicians and people in the administration who are making very, very bad decisions.
We are probably approaching the end, I think, which is probably means we should give everyone a final word, but then also have another little reminder on the Dzyga's Paw fundraiser. So quick word from each of you, and then Jonathan will bring up the Dzyga's Paw page again.
Starsky?
Yes, sorry, I was reading comments. I'm sorry.
Oh, we're having a sort of winding up sort of comment thing, and then we'll have a last look at the fundraiser, and then probably let you go for your you know, your beer and cigars with Soros, or what you've got planned this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much. So first of all, I would like to say big thanks to everybody in the chat and everybody who will be watching this video later. Thank you so much. If you are watching this, you have some very good reasons to do that. And also I would like to say big thanks to everybody who supports Ukraine, and not only Ukraine, but generally democracy and freedom in the civilized world. It's something extremely important today to preserve unity, because unity among civilized countries is something that makes Russians very, very unhappy, and we should always remember that. So thank you so much.
Everything what he said, but protecting democracy starts locally and communities. I'm not very good at that, but you listen to a lot of people, and it's like you need to get involved locally to make sure democracy prevails. Democracy is something that is very, very difficult to get back once you've lost it, and it can happen in places like the United States, where I think there's democratic backsliding. Like anywhere around the world, we are at a period of democratic backsliding. When you look at the democracy index around the world, the democracy index that measures this, we are at a period of democratic backsliding, and we need to really be aware of the assault on democracy that is taking place from within our own nations, the assault from oligarchs and moneyed individuals and lobbying and vested interests, and it happens all the time everywhere. And unfortunately, the end result is something like modern day Russia, and we need to make sure that we don't start going down the paths that end up with our countries looking like modern day Russia, an oligarchy where those who are less fortunate are left behind in districts that are underfunded and under cared for. So yeah, democracy is too precious to lose.
And my last word on that as well is for those who are thinking, this could only happen in America. Goodness me, those Americans, how silly they are. I mean, this can happen everywhere. We've got Brexit. We're living with the consequences of a very irrational decision, not economic rational, no economic rationality behind it, very much based on opinions and feelings that drove that. And they may be genuine feelings, and those opinions may be very deeply held, but it's a deeply irrational process. We all have oligarchs in our country. We all have people who would love to take more than their fair share, and even bring the system down to benefit them, their friends, and their family. The only thing that prevents it is rule of law and good people who believe, I think, in more rational and more equitable arguments for how society should be organized. So for those that are complacent, I think the time is to try and make sure you counter this influence, because even if Russia stops, pauses the fighting, it means they'll have more resources for the political, psychological warfare to destabilize our countries, to work through the oligarchs in our own countries and the oligarch-funded media, to try and destabilize and create weaponized narratives that we think are all about, protecting the little guy, whereas in fact they're all about increasing the bank balance of the big fat cat guy instead, or girl, because oligarchs can be girls as well. Well, that's it from me. Let's bring the charity back up on the screen before we wind things up.
Don't
These
forget,
guys. Yep.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, don't forget, if you do donate, thank you, obviously, on behalf of Jonathan Fink and Dzyga's Paul and the unit that receives this kit. But don't forget that if you press donate, you have to press a copy Jonathan Fink for try comment, and make sure that goes in whatever description or field that you can find on the payment page. And if you accidentally do pay without doing that, please send them an email and say, look, I've just paid $20 or whatever, and I was meant to put that to Jonathan Fink, but I missed out doing it. So they will assign it retrospectively. And also, it is worth noting that every $20 you contribute towards Jonathan Fink's campaign, that will get you a ticket, a raffle ticket, and therefore the more that you spend, the more tickets you get, the more chance you have of winning a raffle prize. The raffle prize is a signed flag from the unit, a patch from the unit, and some a goodies bag from Dzyga's Paw, and some Lviv chocolate.
And we'll be doing that towards the end of next week. Hopefully Jonathan will join us, and we'll have I think we'll run another one of these live streams with a bunch of people, but we'll hold that raffle next week, and hopefully we'll have some representatives, Irina, from Dzyga's Paw joining us to do that. And also anyone who gives over £100, pounds, dollars, euros, whatever it, well, pounds, dollars, euros, not anything, because we'll get one of these unique silica curtain patches. We're just about to commission a new batch of these from guys in Kharkiv. So, not only are you helping for the drones, you're also helping, small manufacturing companies in Ukraine to produce those. You'll get one of those through the post. Thank you, everyone.
Just to let you know that you've got in your starred section, you do have someone that's just given you a super sticker. I don't know how, because normally I am in charge of like hosting these when I co-stream them with Jonathan, so he's not used to doing it. So on the right hand side you got the live, and then you got starred next to it. So if you press on the starred, yeah, there you go. And now we can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I was going to say that's very kind. Thank you so much. Yeah, I didn't know how to get those up on the screen, but that's extremely generous. And we've been focusing on the charity today, not mentioning our own patrons, etc. But OS, Jonathan, and myself are always grateful for the coffees and all the support that's provided. But before you do that, today's all about getting Dzyga's Paw to deliver those drones to the front.
Absolutely. And for just if people want to find out what's going on in the world at the moment in terms of the Ukraine war, Donald Tusk appears to be advocating for Poland to join the nuclear nations in the world, at least the umbrella under France and UK, but also there's talk about potentially developing nuclear, I think, although some people are saying it's a mistranslation. But anyway, watch out for that one.
Watch out for that. I look forward to the next time. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much, OS, for sticking with this for almost 3 hours. It's an absolutely heroic achievement to join us on this today. And I'm going to go and have my lunch. Don't know about you guys, but definitely you might have picked up the rumbling stomach in the background of this recording, and also that episode I mentioned where I identified the 10 key areas which indicate that Trump is working to the benefit of Russia. It's worth keeping these to the forefront of your mind, especially where you see these sort of statements coming out that he's going to be tough on Russia. There's no evidence so far that he has been, and hopefully you'll appreciate the episode that I'll pop out later today. For now, thank you everyone so much.
Take care, y'all.